Finance Committee will come to order. Our meeting of Wednesday, March 3rd at 7:15 p.m. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Dave, present the colors. I pledge allegiance to the flag,
The flag,
United
United
States
States of America,
America,
and to the republic for which it
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
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 indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty
and justice
justice
for all.
for all.
All right, roll call. Ed is here, or won't be here. Chet.
Here.
Dave. Lori.
Here.
Diane.
Here.
Scott.
Here.
Yes.
Here.
Ben. Johnny Anzavino.
Here.
Joel.
Here.
D. John Rock. Marty.
Here.
Elliot. Vaughn.
Here.
Enoch.
Elliot and Ben are here.
All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I got 10.
There's two
I'll
more.
check on Enoch.
Elliot and Ben are here. They missed the call.
Elliot's here?
Yes.
I was here.
Okay.
Ben Thomas is here too.
Did Ben show up? Ben, you there?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
That makes 12. All right, we have 12. We have a quorum. We can get going. Okay, motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Votes yes. Bob? He's not here. Chet?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Shoot.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Diane?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
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 Ben?
Yes.
Johnny Anzavino?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
D. John Rock, you show up yet? No. Marty?
Yes.
Elliot?
I'm here. Yes.
Vaughn?
Yes.
And Enoch's not here, okay. We are open. All right, first order of business will be the fire department budget. Chief Laracy, are you available?
I am available.
All right, Robin, are you here too?
Yeah, and if I could, I would just like to pass along a thank you to the chief for his continued tremendous dedication to the town of Stoughton and successful work, particularly during the pandemic. The chief is our lead emergency management person, worked side by side with Sue Herman throughout to ensure that we got FEMA and CARES funding and that we complied, and that was absolutely critical in this. This is the finance committee, and this is where we really should be talking about the financial end of what the chief has done for us. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up. We're talking millions of dollars for the schools in town. And it's just been a tremendous effort. As always, he's just a critical team player and never lets the team down. So he's steps way out of his role to assist in any capacity. And I just have to pass that along. We are begging him to stay as long as he would like.
Second. I second that.
Can we demand it? Can the charter give me the right to just say he's staying?
I don't
You
think
could
so.
refuse his retirement offer.
No, I'm not going to accept it.
Yeah. All right, great. Thank you, Chief. Who's going to take the budget? The chief or, we'll go with the chief.
The chief.
Chief,
Okay.
you're up.
Well, good
Budget
evening,
page,
everyone.
hold on. Page 23 of the budget is the fire department budget. Okay, chief.
All set?
Yep.
Okay, well, I want to start off by saying that this will be my last presentation before the FinCom for my budget. I have an interim contract that runs to June 30th. So, this will be for my budget the last time I'm before you. And I want to say I really missed subcommittee meetings this year. I always look forward to them with a little group of committee members. And yeah, I know with the pandemic and everything like that, we couldn't do it, but I just want to let you know I did miss it. We've had pretty much the same group since I've been here. I know with Scott and John, Anzavino, John Rock, and we've had a couple members in between. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So
I missed it too. I missed it too, Chief. Or do I call you interim chief or chief?
Chief.
you can still call me chief. So the town manager, I just do want to talk about the CARES Act. The town was eligible for $2.5 million, but of course we had to apply for it. We had to justify it, our need. And working with Sue Herman, who does, 90% of the work, because she does a lot with the FEMA too. We applied and we got approved for the 2.5 million. That 2.5 million, it was town-wide, between the schools and municipal government. And when we first sat down with the schools, we did a lot of work with the schools, Dr. Marcus and his team, to see what their needs were, and that how we could. We had the 2.5, and we wanted to capitalize on that whole 2.5, and I think we're gonna by the time it's done. So, working with Sue, working with the school department, we have continuous updates through the CARES Act, which we have one due Friday. So that's been going well. On top of that, we applied for another grant to the Department of Executive Office of Public Safety. And for the police and fire, we got another $50,000 that we could actually use for PPE and as well as overtime cost. As you can imagine, throughout this whole COVID, we've been a 24/7 operation. And, I just got to commend our personnel. I mean, they've done a great job. Like I've said before, when a lot of people step back, they stepped way forward. I mean, they've been at the forefront. They have been actually exposed to actual COVID patients over and over again. But early on, our staff, we put together some really tough guidelines, policies on how we approach these patients, what we're supposed to be wearing. And since last coming on a year now, we've done pretty well in our department. We've had a couple COVID cases, but they weren't internally related, like something you get from like a patient. They were from the outside sources. So above that too, I'm trying to think. I think in November, Medicare has a supplemental program, and it's for mass ambulances. And what we did is we did an application, and when we were done, it calculated out at $240,000. And right now, we're under review. And I don't know what agency in the state, is looking at this, but we're under review now. So I'm hoping that in June, the town will receive some revenue. We calculated it out as Medicare owing us $240,000. I don't think we'll see the whole $240,000, but we're going to see something from Medicare, which is really going to help the town. It may, obviously, it may not in this budget year coming up 22, but it will eventually be available to the town. So we're pretty proud of that as well, the work we did. And a lot of us at the station took part in that. That's strictly our EMS operations. What it cost us, equipment. We included some PPE, all of our supplies, everything from buying monitors and all that. So that's the update on what we've been doing throughout COVID while still managing COVID. So I think I always give you the fire department's budget, and I try to highlight the areas that have changed, so we're not going over every single line item. Does everyone have that? And if you don't, I mean, we'll go through it anyways. But so the first area I wanted to highlight is a new position that was created as assistant fire chief, and you'll see on the line item that's $120,000 budgeted. So let me tell you how we got that $120,000, because it's all within the budget, operating budget now. We had $40,000 that we used for fire prevention details. So we'd have personnel come in 3 times a week, and they'd do the inspections on all the businesses, since we have so many. So we eliminated that $40,000. We eliminated a firefighter position. We had 10 that we hired, the 8 plus 2. So we eliminated a firefighter position that was not filled, and our daytime staff gets a stipend of 3% for being daytime staff. Okay, and let me explain. For most positions on daytime, it's the junior officer, and then from there, as more people, officers are promoted, you go to shift. So that totaled out to $120,000. So that was all taken from within the budget. So even though we created a new position that was absolutely needed, myself, I'm the only one outside the union, in the management role. And this new individual who's actually on this call right now by cell is Assistant Chief Mike Carroll. And Mike, I know it's 25 plus years in the fire service with Stoughton. He is a true leader, not only in the fire department, but in the community. He's the head wrestling coach for Stoughton High School. His brother Tim is a lieutenant on the fire department. His father was a former chief in Stoughton, Chief Carroll. And I believe his grandfather, I know his grandfather was on the fire department. I just don't know the rank or when he was actually on. So you got a family tradition there. Mike is held, he's so well respected within the fire department and from his peers. And it made it an easy decision for us. For someone to step in to be that bridge between the union and management. And the time he started, he's been up and running, just like a sponge, soaking everything in. And I see Robin has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm just going to interrupt the chief briefly. All of those things that the chief mentioned that funded that position were actually part of labor concession and labor negotiation. The union actually agreed that we needed this position in the department and needed to help us come up with funding for it. So in that last contract that you all, the town meeting voted for, those savings were voted in that contract. So that 3% stipend, I saw Mr. Anzavino's face. You get 3% more for working during the day. I saw your face because I had the same reaction, Mr. Anzavino, and they were willing to negotiate that away as part of the agreement for this position. So the union was very reasonable about this and understood the need for this position as a departmental benefit. And so it gives you a sense of the type of labor union we're working with here. Very cognizant of the needs of the department, and that's a credit as well to Chief Laracy's leadership too. That doesn't happen when you have poor leadership in that kind of a union management relationship. And I do want to say, welcome to Assistant Chief Carroll. And he did go through an interview process for this. We had many qualified internal candidates, and Assistant Chief Carroll came out on top in the process, and we're very pleased to have him in this role. And he's already dug his feet in, and I know Chief Laracy's already assigned him to a few projects. So we're very eager to see him get his feet all the way in this and take this where he envisions it as well. Thank you.
Ed?
Hold on, wait for the chief to finish.
No, I just want to throw a little information out there to the chief. Mikey Carroll's grandfather was, I think he was Lieutenant Roach. And that would be Mary Martin at building. That was her dad. So there's a little history there.
Thank you, Scott. As we continue down, a lot like the next one, the next example is captains. Okay, you're going to see a significant increase, and I want to explain it as we go down the budget, because certain things were totally eliminated, line items, their salaries in the new contract. A lot of the things were rolled into their base salaries. There's no longer a hazardous material stipend. It was rolled in, no longer longevity. But as I go down, I'll show you that. So you'll see captain's positions, the captain line item. I don't know what you have. I think you have the same thing in front of me. Are you showing 5 FTEs on the last column?
Yep.
Yeah.
What did Bill roll? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Yeah, there's 5 there now. I don't think they made the fix yet.
Yep, it's 6.
6, okay.
Yep. Okay. So we have an EMS lieutenant that oversees our EMS program, and through the last contract, that was increased to rank, to captain. And with doing that, we eliminated one position, one lieutenant's position. So we offset it's still the same number of officers, and that will be the next line item. If you go down to the next one, lieutenants, it's 9. 9 is correct. And you go down to firefighters, you're going to see 46. It's actually 45. And I had Bill Rowe correct that, I think, in the overall budget. And remember, I was telling you one position was eliminated to help pay for the assistant chief. It went from 46 to 45, and that's what that is. Okay. Going down, you're going to see the next one is the program administration trainee. Our secretary, Kathy McGrady, retired after 22 years in with the Stoughton Fire Department. When she left, I believe she had worked already for 6 chiefs, a couple interims since she started. So that line item was in there for her trainee, for someone to train, for her to train them for 2 months. That's not rolling forward into this. We already hired someone internally from Town Hall. She's been working out great. And so that line item, you'll see that disappeared. That's not being funded. The next one is hazardous duty stipend. Fiscal 21, that was budgeted for a 111,600 something right there. It says that was the 2.5% stipend that was approved through previous labor contracts and under a different administration, town administration. So that has been eliminated, that whole 111,000. So that goes to offset the salary increases through the contract. So you'll start seeing how the ones that are eliminated are rolled into the salaries. The next one is the overtime. So I have here, I've been keeping track of overtime since I got here in 2016, and I'm just going to go over it quickly. So in 2016, when I get here, we had two overtime accounts, one regular overtime and one for the second ambulance. And basically, you had to keep track of every time the second ambulance went out, was supposed to go into that account. So we actually, in 2017, we joined the 2 of them, and we had an overtime budget of 620. In 2018, the overtime was increased to 775. In 2000, and let me just see here. Sorry, that was 2018, 775,000. 2019, it went down to 700,000. In fiscal 20, it went to 550. And the previous year before that, the reason why 150 was taken, from that overtime account, because for whatever the reasons were, however the stars aligned that the year before, we had saved $240,000 on the overtime line item. And I think that was the time, trying to think when we actually increased minimum staffing to 11, and we started staffing 2 ambulances in 2017 after I got here. And that's the increase. We did a comparison of other towns similar to our size, and we came up with a 650. Last year was $150,000 in my overtime. So to give you an example, if that 150,000 was still there last budget year, I would have evened out. So it was put back in, but not to the levels it was back in 2018, 2019. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. I'd be more than happy to send out the committee my overtime comparisons year to year. If anyone's interested, just send me an email. I'll send that out to you. I've been keeping track of it. Okay, the next one is overtime EMS. And that was increased by 7%. So basically what that is all our paramedics, all our EMTs work under a medical control doctor. That doctor is Dr. Muse out of Brockton Hospital. It's a requirement of the state for us to have a license to the state. We have to be overseen, quality assurance, new policies and stuff like that. We have to have someone reviewing that. So what it is every single individual is required to attend what they call rounds, Dr. Muse, okay, or another rounds, and that's budgeted for 5 rounds, so 5 training sessions per person, and that's what that money is. It's a little bit higher than last year, and it's a little bit higher because of the new contract. So, and if I'm going along, just stop me if you have any questions. The next line item that I have highlighted is the overtime inspections. It was funded at $40,000. It's been eliminated. That $40,000 went towards the assistant chief salary, and that's the one I was talking about earlier. The holiday pay decreased. So all our personnel paid for 11 holidays, like they do in the town bylaw. What am I trying to say, Robin, on the municipal side? Not the, yeah, well, it's the same as all employees get, so townwide, so.
Right, so what we've talked about in the past is we have two documents. We have the town bylaw and the contract, and a former HR director thought that it was nice to give the unions the choice of whichever one was better. And we really prefer to work off one document. I don't really like my unions getting to cherry pick which is better and which is not. So in an effort to allow us, this way, anytime we modified the bylaw, we potentially would be giving a union benefit without negotiating if we ended up modifying the bylaw. So basically, we took that option to pick the better out. We negotiated that language out. And during the negotiations, whichever one they were normally picking, we just put into the contract. So it's contractual, but now it becomes a subject of bargaining. So that happened in almost every contract you have all ratified through with me has had that language removed.
Yep, and that language is big when you can pick and choose. And that's what happened in this case with holiday pay, because what you could do is if our personnel were actually working a holiday, they get time and a half. So basically what we did here with that, eliminating that language, they don't get time and a half if they're working a holiday. And that they've only been getting that for a couple of years. I never got it before that. So that's been eliminated. That's the savings you're seeing in this account. Longevity for fiscal 21 was 85,000. It's been that line item has been eliminated and rolled into salaries. Okay.
And to be clear, that was done as we have with others with some seniority steps. So these employees will see a bump at a certain year, and then so many years later and so many years later. It's not an annual check.
Yeah, and that's
it's not, as Mr. Anzavino likes to call it, the living and breathing award. So that is not here. We do reward employees if they stay for a long time. They get a little extra bump on above their COLA in those years. And then they go up to that, but there are many years now where they would go up to, we eliminated several of those incremental increases. So they stay at whatever that bump level is for much longer than they did before. And so they were getting a check every year with that increased number. So 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 25. And I believe we've got 3 extended steps instead of, I think, 5 longevity steps that there were.
Yep, exactly. And new employees coming in, it takes them 5 years to be here actually before they're really getting longevity.
And we actually have a probationary period now, that they don't come out with that hazmat roll-in, that stipend roll-in. The first 6 months while they are probationary employees, their salary does not reflect that. Once they come off probation, that roll-in of that stipend into a salary, they then move to that salary level. So we actually created a probationary step to get them on board, make sure it was working out, and then that roll-in of that slightly higher salary with the roll-in of the hazmat went into there. So we now have a probationary step that's a little lower, no longevity payments, and a stretching out of when there's an increase for seniority.
So continuing down, educational pay, incentive pay increased. It increased as people go higher in their degrees. Then obviously it's going to increase and increase. And that's not set on salaries. That's set on specific amounts of money. So basically, what it is, it's you had an associate's, now you get a bachelor's. That's going to increase it. And what we find is as we hire new employees, they are eligible for that educational incentive if they have a degree. And we can actually, when we hire them, we know that ahead of time by looking at their resume packet, application packet. So that's all how that's figured in there. So that basically sums up the salaries. What you'll see for full-time employees is not 65 in the lower right, it's 64. Okay. The year before it was 66. If anyone has that question, 66 included the trainee, which was only for 2 months, and it included that firefighter that was eliminated. So we're at 64. So let's get before I get into expenses. Is there any questions?
I got one.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
All right, actually, I got a couple, but you just said your total now is 66, right? Instead of 65?
64.
64, John.
64?
Yep.
So what was missing? Because we lost, you added the captain, right? That went from 5 to 6. The firefighters went down from 46 to 45. So that was a wash.
You
The
also
lieutenant.
lost the lieutenant.
It's already adjusted, it went from 10 to 9.
Okay, and that dropped down. Okay, so that's why you're at the 64.
Yep.
But the assistant chief was new, right?
Yeah, that's a new position, and once you just said that, John,
Yeah.
and I did it twice today with it was still a 64, but that's the new position. I'm trying to think how that was,
Well, it can't be. I mean, you got a wash on the other two. You dropped this one, you went up on the other one. It still should be, I think, 65.
Well,
no?
Firefighter, we lost a firefighter in trade for the assistant chief.
Right.
yeah, that's what it was, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had 46 firefighters.
Now you only
Now
got
we're down, that's where it was. The wash was the firefighter for the assistant chief.
Well, I mean, I'm adding the numbers that are here. You got 1, 2, 8, 9, 18, 63, 64, 65. So how's it go down to 64?
So I think you're adding in, let me just make sure here.
I got
I
the
gotta
chief,
find it on my
assistant
thing.
chief. I got 6 captains.
You got 6 captains, you got 9 lieutenants.
Maybe chief, 9 lieutenants, 45 firefighters, the 1 motor equipment repairman, and your program admin.
Yeah,
Don't you drop one of those lieutenants out of there, chief, to give
So-
to the captain?
so here's, just let me go down the list here, and let's make sure we're all on board, because I worked with Bill Rowe on this. So you got 6 captains, you got 9 lieutenants, it's 15. You got 45 firefighters, gives you 60. You got the chief and the assistant chief, 62. You got the mechanic and the admin secretary, administrative assistant gives me 64.
And what about your deputy chief?
65.
Thank you.
Yep.
There we
You're
go.
right, John.
Mr. Chairman, I think Jess has a question.
Wait a minute. I said I had a couple.
He ain't done yet.
So, all right, so that takes care of that one. Now, your overtime, you still got 4 accounts here or whatever, right? But, so you got rid of, you said you eliminated the 40,000 from overtime, and that went in towards, for the assistant chief.
Yep.
But the overtime went up 80,000 when you add them up. So even though you got rid of the 40, the remaining overtime went up by 80. And like you had mentioned earlier, and I do miss meeting with you as a subcommittee. When we took on the 8 firefighters and we were expanding, we were looking that we should be able to cut back on the overtime with all these extra firefighters. Now we lost a firefighter to get another position
So
in,
let me,
but the
Yep.
overtime has gone up 80,000.
so we were given 12 firefighters, 8 safers, 4 firefighters. We lost 2 of those in last year's budget or the year before, which gave us the 10. So now we're down to the 9 additional firefighters. So, and as far as the overtime goes, John, that's why I want to show you my comparison. 2 years ago, we were down $240,000. Last year, it could have been, I don't know if it was COVID. I don't think it was COVID. It's exactly where we should have been, but that 150 was eliminated, and that was put back in this year.
Well, I'm just kind of concerned that, when we talk about adding people in and, with the hope that, the more people would be able to cut back here and there. But even though we got rid of the 40, the other 2 that went up was 80. So,
If I could, I think part of the juggle is, in an ideal world, you're right, Mr. Anzimino, if we always had every firefighter position staffed, we would see our overtime drop a little bit. One of the reasons we thought it was okay to give up that 1 firefighter position and toward the assistant chief is it's very rare that we are at full complement anyway. By the time we get them through civil service, by the time we get them on the trucks, it's a long time. And like police, sometimes we have vacancies. It is rare that we had a full complement ever. And so a lot of times what happens is you have this vacant budgeted position. And so we sort of took the odds on that if we eliminated that one position, we likely would still be fine and have just as many as we ever would have had anyway.
Are we full now?
Chief, we still have one vacancy, or did we
Is
fill
every
it?
position on here filled?
Got one vacancy.
And a couple potential retirements.
Yeah, we have a definite retirement April 5th. We had one of our firefighters that was gonna retire on January 23rd, and he rescinded that. But that I know will be before June. I have a captain who, told me that most likely he'll be retiring this year. So, when just use the
So-
captain for an
So
example.
all that money that's appropriated for those positions,
Yep.
when they leave, the money's there. Is that what you're gonna use to buy them out if they have things going, or? Because obviously, if the money's in the salary lines and then 3 people leave, depending on what you have to give them on the way out the door,
Mhm.
that leaves money in addition to be paying for overtime for people that gotta cover those positions.
So the gentleman, the firefighter who is retiring April 5th, we have a firefighter because it takes months to get them hired. We can't get them into the academy until they go through their, what they call physical agility training, psych exam, medical exam. And that person has been given a letter of offer that will be starting soon to replace that firefighter. Prior to the last contract, until someone graduated the fire academy, we could not utilize them. We couldn't hire them.
Right.
The
No,
first day,
I know
yeah,
where
the
you're
first
going.
day started the
Mhm.
academy. And the union, working with the union, they allowed us to bring on firefighters as soon as we could and strictly work the ambulance.
Yep.
But they weren't counting as staff. So they, as the minimum staffing was one of the concessions. But let me tell you, that getting a firefighter on board, we've had a number of new firefighters actually work during COVID. And, and I kind of feel bad for them because being the junior person, when I told you we have procedures in place that, regarding patient contact, they were usually the individuals that were making the initial contact and going in and accessing the patient to see if they were actually, had COVID symptoms. And they worked out great. So by the union allowing us to bring someone on early, it's allowed us to get them into the actually fire academy sooner too, which is right now 6 months out.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying that you mentioned you're gonna have, you could have 3 people retiring.
Yep.
Before the end of this fiscal year.
Yep.
Which means this fiscal year is gonna take care of those people. Those 3 positions are being funded at the level that the people that are in there now.
Yep.
Are making.
Mhm.
So when they leave, that money's already appropriated now for 22, and it should be at a higher level than what you would be bringing people in. And I'm just saying that money's in the salary line. You just told us that it could be 6 months or more before you get them, but we're funding it fully. And guess what? We still went up on the overtime, and the money that's there for these other people, once they're gone, is still available. And that's how, and you're gonna be able to cover more overtime with that for having to cover those shifts or what have you. It's
You know
just
what?
a concern, that's all, just a concern.
When we were over $150,000 last year in overtime, it was covered for those reasons. We were able to cover it bottom line in the department because as we had some vacancies trying to fill them, we were utilizing those salaries. So so yes, I guess to your question, yes, we do that. and we had to do that last year.
Right.
And that's exactly why we were willing to give up one of those positions and not worry that it was going to impact the overtime further because it wasn't likely going to be fully full. Anyway, we like to keep the option to have those positions, but in this case, we did reduce by 1 in trade for the assistant chief because it wasn't going to make that much of a difference.
And that's fine. I'm not gonna belabor the point. We got other people that have questions. Bottom line is the overtime still went up 80,000 and you're gonna have 3 positions that are unfilled, which you just told us is gonna take a while, but they're being fully funded. And I expect that they'll be funded at a higher level than what the other people would be starting new, but that's all. That's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, Jess, you had a question?
Yeah, a couple questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so first is, I'm just interested to hear Chief, well, let me start by saying thank you so much for all of your work during this extremely hard time and everything that you've contributed. I just want to chime in with all of the kind words that were shared earlier toward your efforts, and for the extra effort to acquire the grants. And so related to the grants, I'm wondering whether or not we see any budget relief from the grants, or if that only goes toward additional costs incurred related to you know, the COVID expenditures and such. So, you know, is it such that some of that fund, some of those funds actually do come in and relieve costs within our budget, or not?
Well, that's a great question, and we put in for FEMA reimbursement under the disaster overtime that we had from, I believe, July 1st of the budget year. I actually went before that through FEMA. I think it went all the way back to March. For overtime that we accrued as a result of COVID from, I think it was March up until middle of October. And with the new submittal coming up, and so let me go back, FEMA will pay for 75% of that. So if I request 100,000, which I didn't because it wasn't that much, FEMA hopefully will pay 75,000 of that. And the other 25,000 we're allowed to put towards CARES, pick up 100% of the whole thing. We did that. The only thing is it's the waiting game now of what FEMA actually gives us. That public safety grant I told you about 50,000. We did that is, you know, we can put some overtime towards that as well as a bottom line. As far as operational expenses, you know, early on the town, as far as our PPE, set up an account for us to draw from, knowing that we'd be able to get reimbursement from FEMA. So a lot of our protective equipment, our masks, gloves, everything that we wear, really didn't come out of the budget. They initially did, and we transferred them over to FEMA. So we did try to capitalize on that, if that answers your question.
And if I could jump in there too, I mean, we wouldn't want to use it going forward. Number one, you have to be careful on supplanting anyway. Number two, it becomes a structural deficit going forward. But in cases where it really is going to benefit us is things like the overtime where we may have some revenue shortfalls in 2021, anything we don't have to spend out of the budget that we can apply appropriately toward those grants helps us at least on the turn back to offset. And we talked about the fact, and I said to you all, with emergency spending only and things like that, come year end, we're hopeful we can offset those revenue adjustments and losses that we know we're going to have.
Yeah.
That's
So
what
at
the
least
grants
in the
really
short
help.
term,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what they can help.
I agree. You don't want to end up in a structural deficit over it, so that's good. But at least in the short term, it does help
Very
offset
much
some of
so.
those costs. Yeah. Thanks for that clarification. And then the other question I have does relate to the sort of movement toward top heaviness in the department. So just thinking about the public and so many concerns coming out of our taxpayers right now during hard times. I think it's just sort of a high bar to kind of clear to say to the people out there that we're going to move from 2 chiefs to 3 chiefs. We're going to move from 5 captains to 6 captains, and we're going to drop a couple of the lower level positions. And I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on the reasons for retaining both a deputy chief and adding an assistant chief, rather than converting the deputy chief position to an assistant chief. Specifically because I know last year when we had this discussion, you talked about how the deputy chief was inside the union, and that caused some difficulties, and you know, you couldn't be the only person who was outside the union, which I think all of us understood, and if we think that makes sense. But I do think it would be helpful to clarify for the public's benefit why it is we need to have 3 chiefs, and why it is we need to have 6 captains. You know, these are, you know, over the long haul, it's going to add to the budget, you know, in a continuous way, year after year, higher salaries. And I think the other thing that, as a FinCom, when we're looking at budgets every year, we never really bring into account directly into these discussions, but I think we should be thinking about OPEB related to these other, you know, these salaries and costs over the long haul. So I just wonder if anybody's ever doing these sort of OPEB analyses as well to tell us when we add an assistant chief position. You know, it's one thing to say we took 40,000 from over here this year in the budget to help cover these costs, but it's another thing to say, well, actually, it's going to cost us, you know, X number of millions in, you know, the lifetime of the salary plus the benefits that are associated with it post-retirement. So I just was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit for me. Thank you.
So I think is in regards to that, well, let me go back to the deputy chief, okay? Not this, well, this last contract as well, but the one before that, we were trying to negotiate the deputy chief out of the union to a management position, okay? And that went nowhere. That's been tried to be bargained twice, okay? This round of bargaining, they agreed to eliminate one firefighter position to help offset that funding. Now you're talking about the benefits cost of all these positions. And I think, the town manager can speak to that better, but does someone actually look at these? Absolutely. I can tell you who that individual is, because I hear about it all the time. It's Sue Herman. And Sue, and that's a budget item. She looks at that all the time, because she's the first one to tell you, and not that you need to be reminded, but it's not just salaries, it's benefits. And benefits, of course, will range. Example, health insurance from the individual to the family. It's considerable. It really is. I think the town now it only has the one option for health insurance as a provider, which they've been working for those savings. So, Jess, yes, Sue Herman is the one who's looking into that as well as the budget team. And we tried to negotiate that deputy chief out of the union, and we couldn't. And the compromise was going down one firefighter, 1 for 1, but of course the salary is not 1 for 1.
And Sue's not with us tonight, right?
I don't know, sometimes she's here.
I don't see it.
She's here? No. Okay.
We'll have to follow up with her maybe and get some figures to help us put this into perspective.
Get the pension too.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay.
Pensions.
I also know that she follows the way these are amortized out, that at some point we hit a high point on contribution till the pension's properly funded. And so, yes, these all impact our contribution until that point, but at some point, the way it is, we'll hit a peak, and then we'll be able to I think, as I understand it, it's going to level off a little bit anyway, so we will be able to absorb some of these a little bit better. But she certainly is the expert on all
Well,
things.
that all depends on their assumptions.
Well, yeah, and if they drop the rate of return, where
Right.
there's not a community that's not going to be in trouble. So
Right.
They change their mortality table, which PRAC's yelling them at it for. They're looking at the world a little different than everybody else. So we'll see where that goes. But
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just wondering if anybody's doing any financial modeling around the additional costs over the long haul, even with the salaries while folks are employed in these positions. When we add a position at that level, we are adding that cost plus the additional fringe, in perpetuity here to the town onto the tax dollars. And I think that's just a serious thing to do, given where we're at, especially with all of the capital projects we've been discussing as well at the same time, and feeling like we're sort of squeezed at the top end of our budget. So I just think these are things that, we as the finance committee just need to keep paying attention to.
okay, anybody else got questions? Come on now,
Get 4 people with their hands.
step up.
Oh, has a question.
I don't have
Elliot has
that.
a question. John
John's-
has a question.
John's in charge of the board. Who's up, John?
I think I am.
Joel, okay, Joel, good.
My questions are pretty simple. My first question is for the town manager. The next year's salary for the fire chief. I know you're in the process of bringing on a new fire chief. Is that an amount that's fixed, not to exceed? Is the salary going to be negotiated? Will it be a contract that's over a multi-year, or how is it actually going to be?
yeah, that's a good question. And the chief knows how I feel about this. I have a very hard time bringing somebody in higher than a person who is leaving. I understand that it happens sometimes when you can get nobody to apply for a job, but I have no intent of paying somebody walking in the door what Chief Laracy is getting walking out the door. In all honesty, Chief Laracy's position is underpaid by comparables. We had adjusted the police chief, and Chief Laracy and I had actually talked about adjusting his salary as well at some point, because it really is not commensurate with surrounding communities' chiefs. However, I am not looking to increase that upon the arrival of somebody. I think it's disingenuous to do that to the chief, and frankly, it's still a good salary. It's just that, you know, I do believe Chief Laracy should have been adjusted had he stayed. But the answer, flatline, bottom line answer to your question, that is a max, and I really actually don't anticipate spending that much. That was budgeted in before we had official word on the retirement.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there gonna be a multi-year contract on this, Robin, or is it a yearly?
I have to work that out. This is a town manager appointment,
Right.
the fire chief, so it will depend. I don't typically do formal contracts. I may do a letter of agreement of some
Okay.
sort. I tend not to give, it's a little challenging because my other directors don't have contracts. I have a few non-union I have a letter of agreement with a deputy police chief, for example. People who leave who leave their civil service or union positions to step up into non-union, sometimes we will work something like that in. But I typically don't do what I would call a formal contract, but I likely may have to do some type of a letter of agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. And Chief Laracy, a couple of very quick questions for you. The education incentive pay, I'm not exactly sure how that works. If I'm a firefighter and I walk into your office and I say I want to get a bachelor's degree in French literature, will that qualify as incentive pay?
No, it will not.
Ah,
So basically, is a minimal list of degrees that will fall under this incentive pay for new hires. Yep.
what kind of degrees?
Fire science degrees, I would say, off the top of my head, public administration. But I guess the simple answer is, Joel, is any degree that civil service allows within their promotional process that they give you points for, we accepted that.
Can you get a fire science degree around here?
Yep.
Okay, that's new. I thought the only place was the University of Maryland, but
Now, Providence College is where I got mine.
I didn't know that. Okay. And my last question is, this is more of a procedural question. Who in your office does plan review for new construction? Do you have one of your lieutenants, the captains, and do they have to have any special training, and do they get a stipend for it?
So, stipend, no. The deputy chief is responsible for overseeing all inspections, commercial, and overseeing our fire prevention division.
Okay, what about plan review? Do you guys do that too?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, all
So
right.
basically, anything that really goes before the building inspector comes to us first.
Well, that's typically how it's done. That's why I was asking the question. So you don't subcontract that out, or there's no consultant that does it for you?
No.
Okay, that's it for me. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, who's up next?
Elliot,
Elliot, you're up.
Thank you. Through you to the Chief Laracy. Tell me about what's going on with the Narcan and that disaster we had last year. Has there been more or less Narcan or calls or overdose calls? Tell me about it.
So we're definitely seeing a rise in overdose calls. It did slow down at the beginning of COVID, and Chief Carroll can correct me, but it's starting to pick up again. And every piece of one of our apparatus, as well as the police department cruisers, all carry Narcan that we can administer right away for an opiate overdose.
This
Alright.
goes to a trend they're seeing nationwide with overdoses, suicides, domestics.
Thank you very much.
Okay, who's up next? John?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry I came in late. I came from another finance committee meeting for my work, so it ran a little late. And did I miss the chief announcing he rescinded his retirement? Because I came in late. I don't know.
I thought I heard that too.
Yeah. So I know people probably sung you your praises, but let me do that too. Thank you so much for your service and the service of your department during these I think your department has been affected probably the most, or at least a lot. And so thank you very much. You've done a great job, and I want you to know I appreciate it. But I do have a question. So Chief, could you remind me again why it's important to have the deputy chief out of the union?
John, I found since I've been here, I mean, it's a lot of stuff I deal with on my end is confidential in nature, personnel issues and stuff like that. And I've been dealing with it all by myself. I feel like I should have came in this job with a human resource management degree on some of the things you deal with. And I know that many of you deal with as well. So it's just having that extra person. And I don't want to say that you can confide in, because I did that very well with Deputy Breen. And I'm not going to say that wasn't the case. It's the management, it's working on budgets. It's working. I do all our own grants. It's having someone help work with the grants. This year, we have assistance to firefighters grants. We just put in for $400,000 for a tanker truck to give better water protection up by Highland Street. We've been very successful over the years with AFG grants. We have continuous NEMA grants that come out. We have grants to the Department of Fire Services for public education, fire safety education, because we're, even through COVID, we're still getting some programs out there. So we on average, we are bringing in a lot of grants. Some of them are minimal. Some of them are also with NEMA is emergency management grants. That's how we're paying for a lot of the equipment that we're getting, the trailer, stuff that supports the town under emergency, disaster planning. So stuff like that, personnel issues, dealing with personnel issues. I find that since I've been here that it's really hard to get time off. And to give you an example is when someone fills in for me, they have to be compensated. And it's just examples like that, and I could come up with a lot more.
Yeah.
It is why we were looking to get that deputy chief's position into a management position.
Okay, so that makes sense. And if the deputy chief was part of the union, you couldn't share everything with that person, probably. And I don't know, maybe the union contract would prohibit that person from doing certain things. So
it puts that individual into a position as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah, thank you. And maybe you spoke to this. I apologize if I'm repeating something said previously. How are the ambulance receipts doing this year?
So, I work with Ed all the time, because about this time every month, because he knows the revenue has come in that he asked. Right now, with 4 months remaining, we are at about $1 million. We're shy about 100,000, so we still have 4 months to go. I'm seeing that the collections are getting higher as the months go, so I'm predicting probably 1.5 million this year. With COVID, I think it's pretty good. Last year we did 1,670,000. The year before we did 1,630,000. Actually, was just looking at that today. So we're not on target to meet 1.6, but I think we're going to do very well.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I told my other finance committee. We're not doing as well as last year, but we're on target to do okay.
Yep.
So, again, thank you so much for your service. It's, as other people said, I miss meeting with you in person. You've been wonderful to work with, and good luck in, enjoying the rest of your life. So,
thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Okay, who else has got the hand up?
We have Dave and Ben. I think Dave's had his hand up longer.
Okay, Dave up.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, thank you. Thank you to you, Ed, to Chief Laracy. I've been, I don't have always like a direct, you don't always get to, I see the trucks moving around town for different emergencies. Knock on wood, I haven't had to see your people in action, so I've been, I'll knock on wood about that, but,
Right.
but I always hear glowing things about you and your department, and I think you have a lot to be proud of, and you're definitely going, into retirement on top, so I just wanted to give you a lot of congratulations with everything you've done in Stoughton. But there is something that I do have direct relationship with you about, and it's something I wanted to give you credit for, is that my favorite budget, year after year, for all the time that you've been, I think you've been here as long as I've been on Finance Committee, if not longer, and my favorite budget is the one that you present to our, by far and above, head and shoulders above every other budget I've ever seen. You're never afraid to be so transparent that we actually get large font where we can see, in like almost like a PowerPoint, with highlighting all the things that are the salient things we look at are the changes from year to year. And you put in big bold letters with sometimes even with yellow highlighter saying this is what changed this year. I'm bringing it out so that you know exactly what's going on in my budget and why it's happening, so that when we get you in front of us, we get to dig right in and not have to pore over all these the minutia of all the different budgets we see out of these munis reports. So I've always been grateful about that, and hopefully the tradition that you started with doing that with your budget is something that you can pass the torch on to whoever it is that comes in after you, so that we can continue to enjoy that kind of transparency in the budget. I was actually, before I was so crushed when I heard you were retiring. I was like, I didn't even get a chance to ask if you could pass along, your methods to the other departments in the town, so we could see it, that rich reporting across all the departments. I was kind of hopeful about that, but I guess some of the questions had to do with kind of staffing. I know we talked about staffing a lot, but one of the accomplishments you had was the SAFER grants, and I don't remember exactly the conversation you had about like bringing up to 8 new firefighters, and whether or not that met the size of your department that you were shooting for, whether or not we're at full employment, or whether or not you see the need for more staffing, maybe in the context of having more fire stations with substations, how that impacts the future of Stoughton. Maybe if you want to elaborate on that, that'd be great.
Sure. Well, to answer your first question, when I'm doing the budget, when I'm doing capital program in our presentation, my administrative staff works with me on that. So yes, I could see that continuing. Any work we've done, I think the town manager will tell you that when she interviewed for the assistant chief, you can tell how involved all of them were in the management of the fire department. So I could see that continuing. Talking about staffing, let me tell you about the SAFER. The SAFER was probably one of the best programs that came into town. And it wouldn't have come into town if it wasn't approved, wasn't supported at the time by the town manager, the Board of Selectmen, FinCom, and of course, town meeting. Staffing really was somewhat stagnant for the longest time, 1 or 2 here and there. I think John will tell you at one point, they might have hired 4, and that was before I got there, but he's the historian, and we've gone back and forth over this. So you would ask Dave, if we ever put in a substation, obviously it's got to be staffed. And what does that mean? If you staff it with an ambulance only, that's 2 personnel per shift. So potentially a total of 8 new personnel if you did that. If we decided to staff it with an engine, you're talking 3 additional personnel per shift, total of 12. Okay, and out of those 12, 4 of them have to be officers, lieutenants. So now you're talking about promotions on top of hiring. Currently, we have 14 personnel per shift. Could we staff a substation? Yes, but the overtime would be just, I couldn't even guess what the overtime would be, because we have to have minimum staffing every day. So right now, our department, our personnel are very happy with our staffing levels. Would everyone like more? Absolutely. But did that 8 change a lot of things for our department? It did. It changed our EMS revenues from just a little over $1 million, $1,026,000, to 1.6 the last 3 years, by adding those personnel. We added the second ambulance, when most times it was down because of staffing. It diversed our department. We hired under the safer personnel, under those 8, 2 females. And I'd like to say that recently we had a civil service lieutenant's exam, and I believe 16 or 17 of our personnel took it, which is probably the highest that has ever taken an exam. And I believe 15 or 16 passed it, okay? Including all of our safer personnel that actually took it, because they've been here 3 years now, passed it. And it says a lot for the department. It says a lot that they want to step up and lead. To get that many was amazing. And so getting back to our safer personnel 3-year program, it actually just ended January 27th. And they were budgeted for the last 6 months of fiscal 21 by the town, and they're all budgeted for fiscal 22.
Thank you. That answers what I was looking for, so thank you very much.
Okay, Ben, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Robin. And thank you to the Assistant Chief, Carol. I see him there as well. I will echo what Dave and others have said. I agree with everything. Budget as well. It's always presented so well. And thank you for your service. I actually had a visit from the fire department in the last 6 months when my son face planted out of his high chair, because he's a brave climber, but not a good climber. And they were wonderful. We thought maybe he had a concussion. He had a bad bloody nose, and they took care of us, and they were so very safe, masks on. It was wonderful. So I'm so grateful for that. And I hope, thank you for all your service, and through you to all of the firefighters. I guess my question is, I have a few questions. The change for the assistant chief, or the change in that firefighter, eliminating the firefighter, that happened in the most recent round of union negotiations that we voted on at special town meeting. Is that right?
I think you actually voted on that at the spring. I think that went through.
Oh, it was. It's on July 1st. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm wondering about at 46 firefighters, what it sounds like is what's more important is, instead of having that 46th firefighter, is to in fact have the assistant chief. Is that accurate? Because we're going from 46 to 45.
I think it's a combination of not so much just more important or less important, but again, the reality that it was rare that we ever had all of those positions filled anyway. So it was a position that typically sat vacant because of these rollovers and retirements, and it was rare that we were at full complement. So it was sort of a budgeted position that was sitting there. And with the fact that we have very reasonable manning numbers, and I know overtime does get everybody a little nuts, and the need for an assistant chief, yes, weighing out all of those factors together, I think combined it. But a lot of it had to do with just the logistics of it being a budgeted position that wasn't often filled. I mean, it was nice to have a little rollback at the end, but that's not how we appropriately budget. So it's a more honest and direct use of taxpayer money, if you will. It's nice to have those rollbacks, and we do float and cushion the overtime with that a little. But at some point, you know, if that much money is there every year and we have a use for it that's better, and assist the chief, as he said, and having a confidant that he can assign things to outside of a union, then yeah, it probably is. I don't want to say more important. I'm always careful of that because those line firefighters are so important, and you know, no different than any of our frontline workers in any capacity. And I think Jess brings this up a lot, the importance of that frontline labor force. So I'm cautious to say more important or more needed, but just logistically a better formatting of the department, if that makes sense.
Okay, that helps. Does the change slow down the ability to recruit firefighters? If you only have sort of 45 open slots, you're anticipating retirements, you're anticipating folks might leave. Does this, because with that 46th firefighter, we have a wiggle room. So does this slow down the recruitment process? Does the person you have to sort of hold back? And whereas before we always, from what it sounds like, we sort of had this open slot that we're always trying to fill, but it's difficult given the challenges of recruitment. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. You know, when we're hiring off a civil service, what they do is the civil service gives a firefighter exam every 2 years, okay, and the new one's coming out. So basically, what we're working off is an old list. If I call for a civil service certification list, you know, I'm getting probably, I don't know, let's just say 70 people. But on that list, almost all of them are already working somewhere else, and I'll get like 1 or 2 people come in and sign. And that's the thing that kind of slows the process down. Civil service definitely slows the process down. I had mentioned earlier, Ben, that before we couldn't even bring someone on until they started the academy. So now we can bring them on sooner. But once we call for a list, we got to hire someone within 12 weeks. And within that time frame, we're trying to get their physical. And those are the things that slow us down. So I don't know if that's actually answering your question. Position number 45 and 46 have been tough to fill the last year.
Okay.
Real tough. They've been sitting there. So let's just say you got 46. Okay, I got 14 people, 14 personnel on 4 groups. Okay, those 2 extra positions would offset 2 of those groups by 1 each, and that's why it was really tough to fill them. It was awkward to fill them, and when they decided to eliminate one of those positions, it actually kind of fell into place and worked out well for us.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. If we need to, so our fearless chairman has been warning us that there's the potential that there might be fiscal challenges hitting us either just due to structural issues or due to any number of other sort of external factors. I feel like we're living through one right now sometimes, for sure. If we need to cut staff, I guess my first question is, can we cut, or is it legally possible? I'm not saying that's what we're going to do. I'm just wondering, is it legally possible to eliminate the deputy chief position if we need to cut staff from the fire department?
Currently in the contract, there is a determined amount of offices that need to be within the fire department. That's been negotiated, and that's been in for years. So I would say legally, but contractually, no.
Okay.
Okay, that's how I'll leave it like that. Because that position actually accounts for, say, one of the 16, whatever it may be.
One of the officers. Yeah. Okay. If we need to cut staff, what's being cut first, the assistant chief or the firefighter? If we need to eliminate a staff person from the fire department, what's being cut first?
So let's use what we have now. If I get that 45th position out there, okay, then I would eliminate that one firefighter position.
Okay, so you'd eliminate an open position is what you would do.
It's open, absolutely.
Okay, and then my last question, thank you for answering all of my questions. If you have to put yourself in the shoes of the next chief, is he or she going to come in here and say, we need a 46th firefighter? Because what I have seen, and I know these things sort of ripple through time, and I think it's not always the same actors who are operating at those different times, and I just want to make sure, is that person going to say that? Are they going to say next year or 2 years from now, are they going to be like, you know what, we're shorthanded. We need the extra firefighter. We also need to keep the assistant chief. And why this is important is because we eliminated positions from another department. In particular, we don't have a counseling agent director any longer. We eliminated a staff person from the counseling agent department and the youth commission. And so when I think about these things, we have to, as a committee, think about the long-term effects. Like Jess was talking about OPEB, but we also need to think about how staffing changes. So my question is the next chief going to say we're shorthanded, we need an extra firefighter? Yeah,
I'll use myself as an example. I didn't walk into this position I didn't even get my feet wet. I was being told that I needed more personnel. I was being told that by the select board at the time. I don't think I was being told that by the town manager at the time. He certainly knew that we needed more staffing. It was just how to achieve that, how to fund that. So I would say yes, even with the town manager, he knew that we needed more staff. So, instead of coming in and maybe having a little honeymoon phase, for 6 months, I didn't get that because I was thrown into the fire and the staff. And when that was presented to me, I knew about the SAFER grant, and I presented that as a way to help fund new positions over a 3-year period. And that's in the town supported that and went forward. As far as a new chief coming in, I don't think a new chief, they shouldn't come in right away having that mindset until they actually have time to see how things operate, how they function. But they do that? Absolutely. I can't, but I certainly didn't come into this position looking to do that. But I can tell you, I'm thankful that while I was here, we got those positions, because I've told this committee, to me, it's not about the money that we bring in from the ambulance. It's about the service that we provide to the citizens. And I think John had told me when I first started, he said legally somewhere it's written that I have to support a fire department that meets the needs of the citizens of the town. And I think that's what collectively we all did in the last 5 years. So.
Thank you. Well, you're an extraordinary gentleman and a scholar, and I love working with you, and I wish you all the best in retirement. And thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you, Ben.
Eddie.
Yep.
Eddie, just one quick question for the chief.
All right, because I got a few too. So.
Yeah, this is a quick one. Chief, are you running short now with anybody out? If they're out on disability or injury,
yeah, actually,
Yeah.
So that's actually a great point, and it plays into the overtime too. I have one out on long-term injury. I have one out, I guess you'd call them on maybe medium range, 6 months, potentially up to a year, but I think 6 months, and hopefully in June that individual will be coming back. I have one out on a medical with, I'm not going to say what, but it's a occupational hazard of the fire service, and that individual has been out for 2 years at least, 2+, and he was at a point when he was going to retire. He's one of my senior guys. I guess there you go with institutional knowledge, and he was going to retire until he got this medical diagnosis, and he's still receiving treatment. And I have one that just had, it will be out probably 3 months on an orthopedic IOD. And this individual, he rehabs very well, and he gets back as soon as he can. So I have 4 out right now. And three of those are long term.
One of the challenges we face is that we ultimately, if they're injured on duty, and we agree that it's an injured on duty, and our doctors certainly agree, and we try to move those through as quickly as we can. I mean, we really work hard to get these through and process quickly through our company. But the problem we run into is Norfolk County may not take it on as quickly as we would like them to. So quite often we may have a disagreement between Norfolk County on a work disability versus what we believe is a work disability. And again, that's out of our hands, and they linger. We are at the whims, again, of Norfolk County with how long they take on that. So we may have a long-standing IOD that we're ready to process through, and it can just take an awfully long time and get tied up there. And that's very, very costly to us.
All right, I understand. It's just, that was one of my standard questions that I'd asked the chief in the subcommittee, and I did miss doing that, Chief. I really did. And as others have said, the presentations you had done were very impressive. It's one reason I didn't want to get off the Public Safety Committee, because I always liked meeting with you, and I wish they required all the other departments to do it the way you do. And
thank you, John.
And with that, I know I wrote you, when you first announced, but it has been a pleasure working with you, and I think you've done a great service for the town. You are one of the great hires for this town. You are a gentleman, and we will miss you, and I wish you the best in your retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, anybody else on the committee have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I had a couple questions on this.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. The previous speaker had asked about if necessary to cut from the department, would it be a firefighter cut? Or I think the question was the deputy chief or assistant, whatever it was. And the answer was that it would be an unfilled position. Assuming that all the positions were filled, what would the cut be? That's what I interpreted that person's question to be. So maybe if that wasn't the question, then you could answer that. Just a question. My other question is, what was the thinking behind removing a lieutenant position and adding a captain position? What was the advantage to doing that?
So Vaughn, that's a good question. So that captain's position was created in our EMS division. Our EMS officer was a lieutenant, and really what I wanted to do if things played out, I wanted to make that EMS officer's position a deputy chief. Okay? Not adding a deputy chief. I'm just saying if with the reorganization worked out that way, because what I have is my officers that work the day shift are junior officers, and that's where you have to start. Whether it's EMS, whether it's fire prevention, or safety and training. And so that position, I did want to make it a deputy chief's position, and the reason why is because that's such a major role in our fire service, in any fire service. It has been such a major, that position is a major player throughout COVID. I mean, just working with the hospitals, working with policies, working with the Office of Emergency Medical Service, our medical control doctor. Now, recently vaccinating all our personnel, and we can work with Sharon to get that done as well. So that was the responsibility of that position, was the reasoning to make that a captain, that position.
So is that a problem where do we need another lieutenant now, or is that going to be an issue going forward?
No. So we didn't create a position. We just that position went from a lieutenant to a captain.
Right, but I didn't know if we maybe needed to have 10 lieutenants on. The other thing that was kind of surprising to me about the cutting of the firefighter was I had been under the impression that for years the fire department wanted more firefighters. So then when the town and the committee and the selectmen moved to add the extra firefighters, I was surprised to now cut one back. So that was why I was asking about that. So back to the other question there, the cutting, if you had to cut one and everything was filled, is there an answer to that?
So I would think with any organization, if we were tasked to cut one, you'd have to look at the newest hire as the most junior person.
All right, thank you.
I have to make a comment on this. I want to be very cautious here. This is a fair and fine discussion, but it sends a message to anybody listening that we are looking to cut. It absolutely will be devastating to recruitment. We are not in that position. I've already told you that in 2021, I will have money to offset revenue losses, and I'm hopeful the schools, because I know they have 180,000 more coming this year, will have some rollback money as well. So we are not in that critical position right now. All indications nationwide are that next year, with COVID restrictions lifting literally as we speak today, that our revenues will go back up, though we can't necessarily budget that way because we can only budget based on 21 actuals. So you'll see low revenue numbers for 22, but likely those will not happen in reality. They will be much higher. We are not at the point of cutting active staff. As the chief pointed out, vacant positions are not going filled. That's how we're keeping money in place. I've had multiple people ask for increased staffing. I have not done it. Ben pointed out that I actually last year have reduced non-labor staff, non-union management positions and consolidated workloads and not missed a beat in a very, very high time of service need and social service need. And we've managed to weather that without missing a beat and in fact increase services through somebody becoming a Shine coordinator for the COA. So we've actually increased. Our OASIS program is getting more grants. So we are functioning very well, but with a very tight and limited staff. I don't, and I respect the questions, Ben, and I respect the question, Vaughn, in this setting, but this is also a publicly broadcast setting. I don't want a message sent that we're ready to start cutting staff when I need to recruit police and firefighters. We negotiated, this union has negotiated contracts with 1.75 raises, which are very fair and reasonable. Even in a COVID time, that's about what's happening that people are seeing. And so it's just very concerned about the message. I do not want doom and gloom out there. Yeah, it's tough. We're in a pandemic. This is not a 5, 6, 7-year recession unless something unrelated to the pandemic happens nationwide, which none of us can ever foresee. And we could always be at the whims of having to cut if that's the case. But I'm very concerned about sending that kind of message right now. And these hypotheticals, what would you cut if? I'd really have, and by the way, that chief who comes in, if he wants to add positions or she wants to add positions, can't do it without me. You all know we have directors who ask you every year to add positions. So remember, we have a lot of safety nets. We have a very trim and tight staff now. Frankly, reducing staff through attrition, we might, yes, absolutely, we try to reduce staff through attrition. But I'm very concerned about talking about hypothetical layoffs when we're not at that point, when we have vacant positions that we can just leave unfilled if we have to. So I just caution everybody, they're fair questions, but remember the message you're sending and remember the challenges we have for recruitment. And we just got through talking about the overtime costs if we can't fill those positions. So I appreciate the questions and I understand the concern, but I really am concerned about doom and gloom. It doesn't help us with economic development. We have developers coming in and buying and building in this town right now because there's hope that we're holding relatively well, comparatively well. And I put us against my fellow town managers. We've talked about what our budget increase was. They couldn't believe it, how low we came in. I mean, my own Norfolk County Town Managers Group was shocked when I said, well, we came in with a 1.83. So on the municipal side and how low we were on the school side, frankly. So I just want to be very careful of a hypothetical, what would you cut going down this road? Because it's a dangerous road to go down and try to bring good quality people into this town.
It's an important road to go down, though, when you're adding a $120,000 position, while at the same time our town clerk's office is operating with very limited staff and has been for a while. Our council on aging director was cut. I don't know a single community in Massachusetts that doesn't have a council on aging director. They're very important questions to go down, and we're not sending a message that yes, we're doing cuts right now, but there are always the potential for fiscal concerns, and we need to be thinking long term. And these things are interconnected. It's when you add 8 firefighters to the town, there's going to be long-term consequences that even if they're funded in the short term. So we always need to be thinking that way. Just like if we were to add a bunch of public works staff, we need to think about how that would affect public safety. And so we need to think interconnected in the web and likewise think about potential fiscal consequences. So I'm sorry if I sent the message that we're on the verge of a fiscal collapse, but we need to be thinking about that. And I hope the next time that maybe you go after me instead of going after our good friend, Mr. Enochian, because he is very kind and understated, and he does a great job asking questions. So I
think I said both your names. So, Ben, in fairness, I went after you too. I think I went equally. I tried.
Thank you.
All right. We done with that? Okay. Anybody else got a question in the committee? Because I have some. So anybody else on the committee have a question?
Scott had his hand up. But...
Okay, Scott.
I'm not on the laptop, so I had to retrain myself again.
Uh-oh.
I really don't have any questions because, like John, it was one of my most favorite things to do was to meet with the chief and just be amazed with the presentation on that big white board that moves. Chief, I wish you luck. I enjoyed everything that I saw that you did. It was cutting edge, ahead of everything. You should go into the consultant business and teach others how to maybe bring a budget forth because it's excellent. And nobody can hold anything to you. And you did a great job. You asked questions of us, which I thought was highly commendable. That you took some of our ideas and we listened to you, and that's what it's all about. And I think you've done a good service to the gentleman. I think they're a better force now for having you here.
Yes, Scott.
So thank you very much for everything you've done.
Anybody else? Okay, my turn. I also want to thank you, Chief, for a job well done. Always good working with you. Whenever I ask for something, I get it really timely, which is fantastic, and we're going to miss you. Okay, a couple questions here. The ambulance, the new one, I haven't seen it on this year's go around. Is that going to be in the fall, or what's the schedule for that? Because I want to put some more money away if we're gonna, if it's coming up in the fall.
So we anticipated bringing that before town meeting to replace our A3, and I can't remember the age of it. They have 9-year lifespans and they're out. But what we found is we're trying to honor our vehicle replacement policy. And once we looked at it again, it's showing to replace the next ambulance next year. So what we've said is, you know, to be true to that policy, because every time we go for a vehicle, you know, even whether it's a board of selectmen, does that follow your replacement policy? And if it's yes, it usually will move forward. So you will see it next year.
Okay, so May 20.
Yeah, I don't think you'll see it in the fall. I think you'll see it at the next annual.
All right. Are they still in the 350 range, give or take, or some, or?
Yep. Yeah, 325, 350. And right
Okay.
now, that vehicle stabilization account has enough to fund an ambulance. So,
I didn't think it was that high. All right, we're gonna take
yeah,
care
I
of that.
asked Bill Roll. I think it's got 353,000 in it.
Okay, good. All right, the assistant chief position, he's currently working.
Mhm.
The line item is 0, so how's he getting paid, or has he agreed to stay a captain until the end of the year or whatever?
No, so how he's being paid is the contract, the elimination of, you know, the $40,000, the firefighter, that all started July 1st of this fiscal year. And Chief Carroll was not brought on until, I believe, beginning of January. So that money was already in the budget, anticipating that position.
All right, so you're doing a swap on that, all right.
Yep.
Okay. How are we doing on number of calls? I know we're still in the 5,000 range, and what has COVID done to your calls, you know, against average before
So
COVID? or whatever?
what we found is at the beginning of COVID, when people were really hesitant to call an ambulance to go to the hospital, because no one wanted to be in hospitals at the time, what we actually saw, our fire incidents responses increase. You know, I'll give you an example is as people were working from home, not working, we had a lot of what we call bells and smells, alarms going off from cooking, stuff like that. And that increased our runs too. So we're still, I think last year, and I want to say we did 5,100 runs. We're averaging around 52, 53. So we were right up there, pretty close to our average.
Somewhere in the neighborhood, okay.
Yep.
All right, and the grants, FEMA, whatever they are, you charged off of some costs. Did we pay for any of those costs that you charged and we might get reimbursed, or were they all charged off outside the budget?
Well, a lot of the PPE was charged outside the budget when they set up that account, knowing that FEMA was going to reimburse at some point. I'm trying to think if there's any.
We mentioned some of the overtime back to March of last year.
Well,
whatever.
definitely the overtime we charged to FEMA. Yep.
Did we pay for it first and then you asked for
Yeah,
reimbursement?
absolutely. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the 100,000 last year we allocated for PPE, did some of that get charged to the grant? Or hope we might see that back from
Yep.
our
So
reserve?
Yep. So out of that amount, 75% was charged to FEMA, and the other 25% is being charged to KEERS. KEERS will not see right now. There's just so many grants out there and so many funding opportunities that they actually overlap. And if this one pays for this, then we won't pay for it. And it's just, you know, it's keeping track of all the grants and what they'll actually pay for. So yes, we put it towards 75% towards FEMA, 25% towards KEERS.
And as of today, we have not got a check in the door yet, is that correct?
That is correct. I think KEERS money is already in the door.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, and then just a general question on civil service. If we're having so much trouble filling positions from civil service, what are the protections or cost benefit or plus minus to not be in civil service? What do you see there? What's the protections that's different from regular service?
Well, I think that the issue with civil service is how often they give the test, every 2 years. With civil services, and in the years ago, civil service, I mean, thousands of people would take the exam. You know, I'm just going to say the fire exam, and maybe say 10,000 people. It's about half of that now. I think the last exam was half of that. And out of those, the exam that we're working off of now, it was only like 250 paramedics on that list. And that's what we hire, paramedics. When we call for a paramedic list. So it's been exhausted. What civil service is looking to do now is possibly give a test every year. And it will increase our candidates. So say if you went and got your paramedic, you got it today, but your next exam's not for 2 years, you know, civil service, you got to wait that time frame. Where now, if it's given every year, you can get past the civil service and put your name on the paramedic list. And hopefully it'll get easier to hire.
Okay, great.
Yep.
All right, that's all I have. Thanks for the job well done in bringing our fire service up to a better standard, as we know all the trouble in the old days, funding to ambulances and all that. Hopefully that's all behind us. And just a curiosity question with all the fire station stuff going on. I guess I'm just curious, do you have to have a main station, or could you have two substations?
Well, so
is there any advantage or disadvantage?
So really, right, I mean, obviously right now we have 2 stations. So if you're saying, you know, instead of a main station, add 2 substations, you add in 3. And on my end, I mean, yeah, it would be great, but it's the actual staffing of those 3.
It still comes back to a staffing question.
It goes back to the staffing and what the town's willing to pay. Yep.
Okay, thanks. All right, I'm done.
Hey,
Anybody else got anything?
As Columbo used to say, just one more thing. Somebody's got to explain this to me. So the lieutenants that went from 10 went down to 9, and the salaries dropped, and I'm just going to use round numbers. The salaries dropped $8,000. And we put in another captain that was for that lieutenant. So that went from 5 people to 6 people. But that salary line increased by 150. So how do we lose one guy and it goes down 8, but we add that guy and it goes up 150? Can somebody explain that to me? Because I just can't make the numbers work. And don't say contractual, because it's not good enough. Yeah, I see you, Robin.
Now that would be an awfully lucrative contract, and our fire department actually took a pretty tight one, so.
John, I'm just adding up numbers here.
Well,
John,
that's what I was doing.
I think there was a presentation on the numbers that were zeroed out, certain line items zeroed out.
I don't care about any other lines. I'm looking at 10 lieutenants going to 9, and the salary goes down 8,000. And they said, well, that lieutenant became a captain, and the captains went from 5 to 6, and that went up 150,000. It just doesn't mesh in my mind. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it makes sense to everybody else, but it doesn't make sense to me.
So I'm gonna
let the chief or let Robin take it.
Yeah, you know, I guess I gotta go back to, and I know you don't want to hear it. It's just all the roll-ins of everything. Unless Robin, you know, can explain it a little bit better.
I don't know, I want to look at that, because it does seem off, because
Yeah.
the roll-ins would have applied to the captains as well, and the lieutenant as well, so
Oh,
they all should
absolutely.
have.
Every rank, every
Yeah,
single
I mean,
rank.
unless when you average it out over 10,
Mhm.
it comes out that different versus 5, but it does seem like an awfully high increase
I don't know
versus.
if you can have $142,000 difference shifting a guy, you know, from one rank to another.
Unless it's
Doesn't make sense.
unless it's the compounded cost of all of those rolls in times 10 versus times 6 with the captain. But that seems like an awful lot. I'll have to take a look at it. I'll get you that answer. I'll work with Bill Rowe
Yeah.
tomorrow and Chief Larissy and see if we can hash out exactly what and where on that.
We have that for tomorrow night?
Yeah, I'll try to get that for you for tomorrow night. It could possibly be that when you multiply everything times 10, it just, the factor is that much more for them because it's almost double the number. But it just, I want to be sure of that before I give you that answer.
Yeah, well, like I said, when you move one, I don't see how one goes down 8 and the other one goes up 150.
Yeah, because they all have the same roll-ins. So,
So,
yeah.
Anyway, thank you. If
Yeah, we'll confirm that up, John.
For you tomorrow night.
Confirm that up.
Thank you.
Is that where Columbo drops the mic? Is that the during the case?
You know, he always says, "Oh, one more thing."
Yeah, just before he gets you. Okay, anybody else? We good on with the chief? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks
very
again,
much,
Chief.
Chief, and good luck in your retirement.
Thanks,
Thank
Chief.
you.
Thank
We
you,
will
Jim.
see you for capital.
Been a pleasure. Oh yeah, we'll get you for capital. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah.
See you for capital.
Are you gonna
I'll
be
let the
around
other-
during-
Thanks, Chief
are you-
Carroll, as well.
Are
for
you
being on
around during
tonight.
town meeting?
Yes, and congratulations,
Chief, are you
Mr.
around during town meeting, or are you going before or after town meeting?
I'll be here for town meeting.
Oh, he's here for town meeting.
Oh,
Yeah.
great, okay.
Yeah, he's here.
Oh, my God.
The one peep we got out of the.
That's all I have to say. He's gonna
A
be here.
sense of humor was critical in the hiring of the assistant chief.
Yeah.
I just keep him laughing for now till I get everything under my belt.
There you go. All right.
And
Thank you all.
I thought all you guys were heroes, Mikey.
Good luck to Assistant Chief Carroll going forward.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you.
Chairman?
I appreciate it.
Yes, who's up? Hold on. That's right, I forgot. Anybody from the public have a comment on the fire station budget? Police department, yeah, fire department.
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Walsh.
Yes, Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street, Precinct 2. Just a couple of things from, the first thing is, I'm participating on the phone, and I can hear everyone, except Mr. Laurie was so garbled, I couldn't understand him at all. And I'm mentioning of this, so if there's a problem on his end, he can fix it. The other thing is I heard about the OPEB costs, and you know that I'm a retired public employee myself, and there was a study done, and firefighters have the least longevity after retirement. Teachers have the most, that there are retired teachers in their hundreds. And so that's something to consider because of, I heard the chief talk about someone who has an illness related to firefighting. And I don't know what that illness is, but we should all recognize that because of the hazardous situations and the materials that they have to be exposed to, no matter how good everything we do to try to protect them, that cancer is a huge problem amongst firefighters, and it certainly has shortened many firefighters' lives, even those who are still on active duty. The other thing is, I think because I'm older, I've lived in Stoughton a lot longer than any of you. Growing up, the ambulance service was being transported in the back of a black and white police station wagon. There was no care at all. Usually your mother or your father went with you and held the towel to your bloody wound as you were taken to the nearest hospital. In those days, it was the Brockton Hospital. So I've seen tremendous advances. As recently as Sunday, I called and had a concern, and paramedics came and evaluated my condition, and it appeared that I didn't really need to go to the ER, and I did not, and today I feel fine. But it's a tremendous service, particularly for our population in Stoughton. There are more people over 60 than there are under 18 in Stoughton, so that there's a good many people like me that are aging in place. We're not all in assisted living. We're not all in public housing. And there's not enough that many of us can say about the service that is provided and the care that is shown to us. It's also nice that once in a while you see a familiar face. Some of my former students are on the fire service. So I'd like to say that what they do is very, very important because I've seen what happens when they're not available. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Hey,
Anyway,
we gonna go over the expenses at all, or is that just done?
Thank you.
oh, yeah, no, yeah, let's finish that off.
Hang
Forgot
on,
about that. Spent so
excuse
much
me,
time on the top half.
excuse me, through you
Thank you.
to Cynthia Walsh. I have a different microphone now. Not that a new microphone will make me any more coherent, but how does it sound now?
You sound just as good as any of the other members of your committee. So I just didn't want the public to, because you usually have some very good questions. We heard the answers and had to kind of figure out the questions. So I'm glad you were able to remedy the situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia.
I think Vaughn gobbles you once in a while, just.
A little sabotage, a little.
All right, yeah, we forgot about the expenses. Chief, got any comments on the expenses?
I think he left.
Oh, Robin will have to take it.
He got, well, the getting was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
released him.
can cover that. It's pretty straightforward. We pulled, as we did everything else, all the facilities costs and put them under facilities because the billing all happens out of Paul Shaffoon anyway. So we consolidated those like we have every other department, and you'll see those costs reflected in the facilities line item. When you see a like $1 million% increase in that, and you all keel over, you'll know why. And if you look, everything else was basically level funded or reduced. That was all done in conjunction with the chief's recommendations on where he felt he could take a couple of trims. Again, I always caution you not to look at the year-to-dates, as we've been real tight on spending, though in their case, for the most part, some of their spending really isn't discretionary. You know, buying gauze pads for ambulances, I don't consider that is always emergency funding, if you will. So it's about as straightforward as it comes on this one, and I'm not terribly concerned that the chief's not here. Anything that we did cut was cut with his input as well.
All right, anybody got any questions on expenses?
There was only, because there was only two, well, there was, other than the gas and grease, which we knew.
Yeah,
But
moved over.
he only really had two things highlighted.
Yeah.
And, you know, the food went from, you know, whatever, the food went from 1,500 to 2,500, so I guess they're eating better, but the clothing and uniforms went from 60,000 down to 10. So.
Contractual. We, yeah.
Did that get rolled into salary too?
No. Contractually, actually, their uniform allowance went up contractually. It may be that based on number of new hires, a lot of that comes out of there. And we changed how we pay that out for new hires. Incoming hires don't get a uniform and a uniform allowance. They were coming on, getting a brand new uniform, and then getting a uniform allowance the same year. So that's why we set up that probationary firefighter step, if you will. So there was a bit of a savings there with new hires, which is where a big hunk of it is. We did increase contractually the allowance because we had an IRS question on what's taxable and what's not. In their cases, it was very murky because technically the T-shirts they wear, that we can even require that they wear them, and we can tell them to only wear them to work if it's purchased through the uniform allowance. The IRS says that because they conceivably could wear those around the house, it's a taxable benefit. So
right. It's not quite the same as the uniform, you know.
Exactly. So
that's a drastic. It was a drastic drop, you know, going from 60 to 10.
Yeah. And the food, by the way, I do want to qualify that. This is not food when the firefighters are hanging out cooking dinner for themselves. This is emergency management where there are emergency situations. I just don't want the public thinking that they're.
No. Hey, if we could feed them for 2,500, that would be a bargain.
And then they should be doing lessons for every household on how to eat and cook good meals.
No, that was the big thing. The drop of 50,000 on the.
Yeah, I've got to look at that. I've got to look at that. I want to check on that a little bit more and make sure that's all that is, because that seems like an awful lot of new hire uniforms too. So let me just take a look at that.
Well, that's why, I mean, it was such a big cut, and then
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that wasn't something that got rolled into salaries, you know.
You know what? Let me check, because that could have been how we dealt with the IRS situation, that we paid it as a salary item. Let me check on that, Mr. Ansavino.
I'm writing it down.
Yep, I will check on it. That is very possible that was part of the roll-in, because that was the question. We had to pay it as salary, then it became taxable. So the IRS, if I recall, what we did was we parsed it out. We gave a portion that was uniform for things like the, that's what it was, for the heavy gear. Yeah. That could not be, that nobody would reasonably wear around the house. We kept that in the uniform line item because it's not taxable. And then to comply with the IRS, we gave the rest as a uniform allowance, and we did agree to put that into their salary. That's what that was.
Yeah.
It lowered the amount.
The only thing when you put it into the salary, it affects everything down the line, your pensions and everything else, so.
It does, and that was part of the negotiation on, you know, taking the 1.5 and the 1.75s.
Yeah, well, I mean,
It's the give and take.
Baby- yeah,
and
well,
Sue-
I'll tell you what, my opinion is they should have given the deputy if they wanted the assistant, but that's just
That
my.
actually was negotiated 2 contracts ago, that there would be a position put in. What we were able to get in this contract was negotiating the funding of it.
And then, actually, I have one question for Robin, if you would, Ed, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you did your original budget presentation and everything, did you send that along? I don't remember seeing it, but I know we had asked for it, but
I believe you have that PowerPoint. I can resend it.
could you, I don't know if I mean, I don't know if I just misplaced it or,
Yeah, I'm happy to I'm happy to resend that.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, anybody else got any questions on expenses? All right, guess we're good. All right, that concludes the budget item for tonight. Now we will discuss revenues. Everybody, Mr. Rowe, you here tonight?
I am, Mr. He's been hiding in the bushes there.
All right. Everybody got the update last week of the 6-month revenue update from Bill. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look at it. We also have our estimated local receipts that was part of the budget back in January. You all have that. So looking at the actual versus the estimates for 2022, a couple of large, let's say, variances have shown up.
Let me get it, which, you're talking about the thing Bill mailed us, right?
Yeah. Can anybody call up the 6-month spreadsheet that Bill sent to us to put it up, if somebody can do that?
I got it.
Ed, are you talking about the revenue sheet that he sent, the 4-year revenue sheet?
Yeah, the 4-year one, right. Yeah, this one right here, yep.
Oh, okay, all right, I was just gonna say.
This
I
one
have
here.
it too. Yeah.
Right, this is what he sent to us. This is actual for the first 6 months of 21 against actuals for 2019 and 18, which kind of irrelevant the further back you go. This is just a perspective, and this is where we are at the first 6 months of the year. And you'll have your estimate sheet that we do, the local receipts, that was part of the budget, that was handed out in January, on the estimated local receipts number that we used to, that was what we did, the 90%, 95 to 75% thing. You all familiar with that, right?
Yep.
Yes, we do it every year, okay. All right, so if you look at the actual sheet, the FY21 that's up here on the screen, against the estimates that we projected back in January, a couple of big items jump out. And the first one will be investment income. The actual for the first 6 months is 63,000. Everybody see that? 3/4 of the way down the page.
Is
Last
it
year
possible
was-
for Marty to zoom in on this a little bit?
Marty, can you enlarge it a little bit? There we go.
Thank
All
you.
right, can everybody see the line there? Investment income? Yeah, there you go, right there. Great, thanks, Marty. 63. All right, we have estimated for 22, 319,000. And we've talked about this before. This is the money that we have from the schools left over that was parked in the MMT money market account, getting some interest rate and blah, blah, blah. But that money's gone, it's been spent, the school's built, so we don't have that cash around anymore. So obviously the number had to come down. Because the average everyday tax money, you gobble it up real fast with payroll every single week. So we don't have millions laying around. I think we need to consider lowering that estimated number. Because if you double 663, which I don't know if that's a reasonable assumption, because rates have come down on what they're paying, but for the sake of discussion, that'd be like $1.20 against 319. So I think we got to think about lowering that estimated number. That's one of them. The other one is the room tax. The first 2 quarters of the year are usually the best room tax numbers. The second half of the year are usually lower. So if this is the best, and you got to assume the second half is going to be less, we had estimated 313,000. So that number is suspect. Some other numbers are positive. It could work out, like licenses and permits seem to be trending higher. There are a couple of small things. The Medicaid reimbursement for the first is up pretty good compared to the estimate of 182. We get some nickel and dime things that we could just zero out, like miscellaneous recurring. Well, obviously $200. No one's paying parking fees in the parking lot, so obviously it's going to go to zero. So that number should probably go to zero on our sheet. And then the fines and forfeits is already greater on the actual against our estimate on the sheet. We can just, that's just a swap, one for the other, miscellaneous to the fines. The fines and forfeits. We have
Okay,
57 booked and it's 72 so far year to date. There'll probably be more by the end of the year, but just as far as math.
yeah, yeah.
And that'd just be a swap. We could up the fines and forfeits to 72 and lower the miscellaneous revenue to zero, and it's just a wash. Up 15, down 15. So just for the presentation purposes. Then the only other, other wild card would be, in my opinion, is the new growth. I think it's a little high. So we could think about lowering that 100,000. And we'll see where that would comes in. But
And if I might just one comment on the rooms tax. They typically does trend lower in the last quarters of the year, but in this particular year, because the first quarters were such bad quarters, it may not actually drop off like it normally would because we didn't have a good first 2 quarters. So I think you may actually see a little bit of a reversal this year. The second half may reflect more normal, not normal, but a less of a percentage drop off, if you will. Because those first 2 years are really not reflective of anything.
Yeah, but you can't look past June 30th.
Right.
Even though it'll be higher, potentially higher after that.
Right.
Because the recap that goes to the state, you can't exceed your 21 actuals.
Absolutely. But when we were looking at that number today, looking at some of our 22 potential tweaks we could do, how far do we drop that? What do we look at? I just want to that was just one little discussion we did have on some of those things. The trend.
Well, I was on the state website today, DLS, and they're starting to get ready for the third quarter posting. Hopefully they'll have it out in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, that'll help.
A little more piece of the pie.
Yep.
Excuse me, Dave. You started to talk about new growth, but I don't see new growth as a line here.
Well, it's not on here. It's part of the budget recap. We had that discussion with the assessors and all that. It's up to 8 something, I believe, 850. They're concerned it might be high. The big wild card in that number is the utilities, which you don't know what it's going to be till they send you their form.
So it's too early to talk about then, right?
Well, it's the question on the recap. If you go in high and it comes in low, you got a problem.
All right, so you're talking about possibly coming in off of the 850.
Right.
Okay.
And remember last year, 250 of that growth was the utilities, a $10 million item. If you don't get the 10 million this year again, you're out 250. So I think we're taking a large risk. Because if the recap's wrong and they send it back to us, we got to have another town meeting to cut it, unless Bill has enough room with these other revenues to offset the math. So, and we're already kind of all in on all these other numbers. So there's not really a lot of wiggle room if you get a problem. That's all I'm saying. Because he can adjust these other ones as the actuals, a little bit here, a little bit there. to make the math work if it's short.
Well,
So,
did you
We've
already?
got to give him some flexibility.
Yeah, did you, on the red flags that you called out, did you already do the pluses and minuses to kind of give like a ballpark number as to where we should think about adjusting?
We spent a long time yesterday with the budget team working on that, and I think Bill will tomorrow have a document for you. Bill, you there? I know Bill's there because we're looking at his presentation.
He's out there.
He's here.
Here I am.
Here you are.
Yes, we would have something for you tomorrow. We're trying to get a handle on local receipts, trying to look at where we were for the last 6 months, and the hard part, of course, is trying to think about what's going to happen during the next 6 months. So, obviously the chairman called out a couple. The MBTA, the miscellaneous recurring. That should be.
We already zeroed the MBTA yesterday. So.
It's nickels and dimes in a big scheme of things, but
we
bigger dollars.
We did, to Mr. Laurie's question, we did spend a good bit of time with the budget team yesterday, and Bill's been working on that, and we'll have for you tomorrow some suggested adjustments on that we believe are reasonable, but are also fair both ways on this.
Can I ask a question through you, Ed? Do you think that we literally have through the end of March before we have to kind of, lock in the revenue estimate? Like, what do you consider, obviously you want to wait as long as possible so you can get as realistic as possible. But what would be the time in which we kind of have to think about a deadline for adjusting the thinking on that?
Well, for us, it's March 31st. That's our last. We can go to 4/1, but all decisions have to be made, done, budget balanced, and finalized on that day. And I would like to do a few things up front so we don't got the last day we're slamming in 20 things to make it work.
Okay, so the communication we have with the town manager and Bill Rowe and their teams is the next 3 weeks, right?
Yeah, I mean, the estimates won't, it's, we might get the numbers from the state for the meals and rooms, but that's it. The rest is kind of guesstimating, and unless the budget team can post January and February's actual receipts and get it to us in 2 weeks. I don't know if that's possible, but that would give us a little bit better picture, but I don't know if that's feasible.
This is realistically, this is all you're going to get for the actuals.
All right, there you go.
The other thing that could happen, though, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, and Sue is really more on this than any of us. We also don't know if there might be some federal funding package money, and I don't. Again, we don't want to supplant, but these are short-term areas. Remember, these revenues that we have to budget on are likely going to be far lower than they really end up coming in, because, as you said, we can only budget on 21's actuals.
Right.
So even if at some point we are able to do some bridging with that money, we're ultimately not going to have a structural deficit, because those revenues are likely going to be much higher than what we can budget for. We'll have ideally free cash on the other end next year, because we have to budget so low on the revenues this year. So if there's some federal funding that comes in the next couple weeks, that may change a little bit of our focus going forward. When we looked at things like the overtime costs and whatnot, I don't want to count it as a revenue stream, if you will, but it does have to be considered.
You can't. That would be a free cash.
No,
thing.
right.
Wait till the end of the year.
Right, but as we look at what we do and where we take risk or don't take risk, if we know what we have coming in for federal, that does change it a little, particularly even with the schools on.
I'm just trying to get our ducks lined up for March 31st.
Yep.
I
But I agree with Mr. Laurie. Things change by the minute right now, and the longer we can wait, just to have the clearest picture we can possibly have, the better.
Well, I think it was important to put it on our radar, so that we know to ask the questions, so we're not getting kind of slammed with it, on the 29th of March or something. I think it's great that you brought it up.
No, there's 2 other bites at the apple here. We just don't know when the timing's going to be.
Right, you don't want to try to redo a budget the last night because your revenues turned out to be less than what you.
The legislature's fighting with the governor for the CARES money on how they're going to allocate whatever they get, and then you got the new stimulus coming that might be something else. But by the time they sort it out, it's after March 31st. You can always do a supplemental at town meeting. It ain't like, you can't get back to the money, so.
Yeah, I have another question.
We have to be done in balance and go to print, so.
Ed, speaking of that,
I just had another question. I just wanted to ask one last question. Do we know how COVID affected the turnbacks that come back from everybody, all the departments? Has it had an impact? Or is it going to be kind of?
I can tell you that when I came to you guys mid-year and said that I had about 200,000 that I could account for right away, I believe that that is probably still very much available. None of those particular areas that I had held on have I expended. So at minimum, I have that. Plus, I believe we probably have more because we've really held tight. And COVID has not forced us to overspend tremendously, except where we are looking at in areas to try to get reimbursed through CARES, like the overtime and whatnot. Bill, can you think of any area where we depleted aggressively because of it that we didn't expect that might offset some of that turn back I have?
Oh, I know in our department, our education department at UMass, that was 350 times 2, myself, Mayor Jane, and plus travel, hotel, so forth and so on. This year it's a virtual program, $75. So that's a big savings for our department.
And we have a lot of those little 1,000 here, 2,000 there, 5,000 here, 5,000 there that actually we saved because of COVID. So as I said, when I assured you that 200 and you left it there and said, well, don't use it and turn it back to us at the end. I haven't gone through recently and pulled every number up, but I can go through and start looking at what I had told you. I have that list of what I could save. I can ensure that funding is still there, give you an idea tomorrow night. I'm pretty confident we have that and more. And at that point, it was a good $200,000 to $230,000, I believe. So I think that's still sitting there effectively in the budget, because again, that's why I said watch those year to dates. If you look at how many of these year to dates were not expended to 6-month points or encumbered, it's because of that, because we're all in such a tight holding pattern.
Has any communication come in from the school side on turnbacks, or is that?
I believe the doc had was it Bill, a $15,000 or a $20,000 or $30,000 turnback that he referenced?
I don't recall that, Robin.
There was a small one we were talking, maybe 15,000. I'll look it back up in my notes. There was a small one, and there is the 177,000 of money that they're not going to use for that security system that had been borrowed for.
Right. Yeah.
So
we have some resources available to do for what we got to do right now. I'm just.
I think for 21, to be honest, we'll be okay. It will be tight. And I don't know if there may be a small shortfall, but given how tight we've been, at least I know on the municipal side, and I don't know what the school has for turnback. I will question you about this, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the schools or argue something that's not on an agenda, but right now what they don't use comes back to the town. There is an article to change that, and I think that we need to think about whether or not that and whether people support that or not is fine, but this might not be the year to have it start, where we need all the turnback money that we can get in 21. So I can't speak to what the schools are going to have for turnback because that may depend on, and I don't want to go down that road for open meeting.
I was gonna save that for next week.
But to answer to your question, will they likely, do we know of at least 177,000 as we stand right now with what we have for the way we fund our budgets? Yes. And the doc, I know, had come up with a small amount somewhere else too, and I'll look it up.
Okay. Well, like I said, that's one of our resources potentially. But again, that's a one-time money. If you use it, then you're short that much next year. So
I agree, Mr. Trumpio, and we have really gone with trying to reduce that free cash. But I think, again, we're sort of in a one-time situation too.
Well, anyways, like I said, we're short about 279 or so, somewhere in the neighborhood.
I'm all set with my questions, Ed. Thank you.
I think I'll come close to being able to find that on my side.
Okay, and if we take the revenues down a couple of hundred or 300, that makes us for like 5-ish range. We can probably scrape that out of the 21 budget with some of the stuff that hasn't been spent to kind of close the gap. And I don't know, where are we on the snow budget? Do we know yet? I know we burned up the budget 400. Where are we on the overage? Do we know anything yet? Where we are?
We're about. I just looked at it today. About 310 over right now.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, they already spent.
Elliot has a question.
Okay, well, Elliot, go ahead.
All right, I'm unmuted here. I'm a little bit confused here. Just looking at local receipts, for instance, and I see 622, 630. Oh, geez, that's nice. I can see it now. And I see 4,088,000 thereabouts
For the budget.
for the budget. Where the hell does that 15% come from?
Let me take that, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, it's just a percentage.
Please.
Go ahead.
Okay, so what they call the big commitment for motor vehicle excise, Elliot, comes out in February, March. Our motor vehicle excise bills are going on March 15th. That's 3.3 million, a little over 3.3 million. So that obviously that's where the big chunk of money comes in 30 days after you mail the tax bills. So this is only through December 31st. So
You follow that?
I
Elliot?
think I got that now. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, this was just to make everybody aware of, our estimates are a little suspect based on the actual so far. And the thought might be to take some of these numbers down. Since the budget team is working on revisiting these issues, we'll wait till tomorrow night to see what they come up with. But the point is, we are short. This could make us shorter. We have a few resources to fill in the hole, hopefully, depending on if the snow budget don't get any worse than where we're at, minus 310 the rest of the year. But so that's kind of some of the ideas, and we can scrape up some more. I want to put some money in stabilization, something to fund the ambulance, the rest of it, and get our 200 back that left last year for the overlay.
I think he
So-
said that we were covered on the ambulance. 353 he said was in there, and he
Yeah,
only
well,
needed three. He only needed like 3.25.
Yeah, we'll firm that up when we get a little further out. But
Mr. Chairman, I believe that Mr. Anzavino has a question.
yep, go ahead.
Yeah, Eddie, the word I've heard is that they were gonna push town meeting out 2 weeks. Has the moderator talked to you at all?
He mentioned he was going to ask the board if they would consider that.
He did
voting.
speak, yeah, I believe he has spoken with the board. He spoke with me tonight. And I believe that we are on track for that to be pushed out 2 weeks.
When they're going to vote it, do we know?
Probably well, it may not be on the agenda for Tuesday, but I would imagine the following Tuesday.
Now, are they using the same COVID explanation with the exception? We have a charter that kind of dictates
Yeah, wait a
timing.
minute.
So,
Let me finish this, Dave.
oh, okay.
If they're gonna push it out 2 weeks, we need to know that as soon as possible. Now, if this was coming out of the committee the other day and they're already talking to people now, today's only Wednesday. The board's gonna meet on Tuesday. That shouldn't be that hard. I don't care how busy the agenda is.
It may be. I just don't know if it's. Mr. Anthony, I really probably even shouldn't have said that Mr. Mullen talked to me.
No.
Can I jump in here, John?
Point
Can I-
being, if they're gonna push it out, that makes a big difference to this committee on what we're doing. And they need to get that settled as soon as possible. And if it's even being considered, then the board should be, in my opinion, they should be looking to address that Tuesday night.
And they may. This all was happening like an hour before I got on the meeting tonight.
Yeah, I'm just saying that I didn't know if Ed was aware of it, and if he is, fine. But that should be something that we push, because if that's going to give us a little more time, fine. You know, we can plan our schedule accordingly. But, you know, I don't want to come up, you know, where we're banging our heads to get things done, you know, forthwith, as Dave would like to say, and then find out that they're going to push it out 2 weeks, and we would have had a little more time to maybe do things in a more controlled fashion.
Point of information. You're asking about whether or not they're going to be holding town meeting 2 weeks out?
Yep.
Yes, the Rules Committee did vote unanimously, I believe, for that, to start on May 17 instead of
Right.
May 3.
But it has to be approved by the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, so is the board going, I mean, presumably, since that was the vote, I'm just thinking it's likely that that's going to happen.
I have a question for Jess. What was the rationale for that?
The rationale was that the Finance Committee chair requested more time.
Really, that's news to me.
It wasn't me.
Is that true?
It wasn't you? Okay.
I didn't
I
request
don't know.
it.
That's what I heard. So.
It would be helpful, but I didn't request it.
So I think there was discussion around that the finance committee needed more time.
We would have liked it. I mean, it would be good for us. We'll have a better idea of what the legislature might come out with House 2 or whatever they call it, and we may know more from the act they're working on now, the what they call it, the stimulus bill. So
yeah,
it would buy us a little bit more time. The only risk we're taking, I don't know about the printer with COVID and all that, if they got enough staff and all that kind of business.
Well, that extra time will help. That
Make
extra
that
time will
tough.
help.
Yeah.
That's our biggest wild card right now is slotting it in to get it ready for town meeting.
I actually have already sent a draft of the warrant to KP Law. She's starting to work on the motions. I have a meeting scheduled with Lauren to discuss that as we speak. I mean, I know it'll be tweaked as we go and votes have to get put in and all that, but we literally want it formatted and ready to go as soon as you all say we can pull the trigger.
When is she gonna send back a cleaned up version?
Well, she's working on it now. I have a meeting with her this week.
Okay.
I hope we get one set of motions.
Eddie,
Yeah, who's that? Scott? Yep, good.
yeah. Would it be prudent to ask who told the Rules Committee that we needed more time? I'd like to know who told them for us, who spoke for us to do this.
Oh, we'll check with Bob and find out.
Yeah, the only time I ever heard about a timing, I was looking to see if anybody from the board was on the call right now, but there was in January conversation where they were trying to push out the date that they gave us the budget because they wanted to see the governor's budget first. So that happened on the front end of the process, not at the end of the process.
And we voted no on that.
Well, don't forget
Right,
the
you
other.
know, that's the only time I ever heard of anything being pushed. That's the
Hey, Marty, can you stop sharing this? I think we're done with that now.
And if you all are done with us, I'll pop off. If this is there anything else you all need me for? If you're gonna, this is more your
No,
discussion.
the other big issue here is the fire station article. Watching the meeting last night, it's we still don't have a funding source. They didn't vote anything. They voted to send us the plans, which is.
They voted to send you the plans, I believe, and they were gonna continue to discuss the funding sources and then move that forward to you once that's hammered out, I guess. But they at least wanted to forward the plan so that portion of it could be reviewed ahead of time.
Yeah,
That's how I interpreted
my
it.
question last night. How did they get this on the warrant when they don't have a funding source? That was
Well,
one
like-
of their own policies.
I really think they should withdraw it from the warrant. It's not ready. And they're talking about changing sites again, look at other properties. I mean, I don't think we're ready.
Yeah,
And the other thing is,
I don't know how they can change sites. The Board of Selectmen set a thing to them, 4-1, the Armory, do a fire station. It's escalated to a headquarters with all kinds of bells and whistles, and I don't know what's gonna happen. I mean.
How do we know it's not gonna come in over 28 at a new location? We have no idea if it's gonna come in higher, and that would impact as well.
well, I think the building's pretty much set. It's more the site work.
I didn't get an answer to that question either, Scott, is how did we end up with all the,
Well, anyways,
admin offices and everything else when we just built them in Station 2 when we put all the headquarters stuff down there, but anyway, they never answered the question. They voted their own policies that, by December 31st, they gave a litany of things that had to be in for an article to go in the warrant. One of them being a funding source, but apparently this one didn't need it, but that didn't qualify as a TIF or a contract, so, but I got no answer when I asked the question last night. And then they continued the public hearing and they didn't give a date or time that it was gonna be heard, so even that I found odd, because I thought you had to do that when you continue a public hearing.
I just find it's a shame that these firemen need a fire station, and it should have been handled in 2007. We shouldn't even be here discussing a fire station now. It should have been done, handled. That's what the building was for. We've gone down the worst rabbit hole in the world, and I just feel bad for those guys. I mean, that station is deplorable.
Well, has been for decades.
They shouldn't, it's just, do a fire station. I just don't understand There's a lot of good people on that committee. I just don't understand why, when the Board of Selectmen gives a directive to them, they're a committee. They're not steering the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen gave them a chore to do, and I just don't understand why we.
Well, they did. They did that. That's what they presented last night. Was the.
Yeah, but why are we talking changing sites again?
Do I get to speak?
The board didn't vote to change sites again.
Do I get to speak?
Yeah, I think we should let Joel address this.
It's either me and Jess.
It's all, I'm gonna hate to tell you, it's all gonna fall on deaf ears with me, because when I'm chosen to be on a committee and they give you a directive, that's what you do.
Well, how do you know we didn't do that?
That's not what I'm saying, Joel. You were told to do this. I don't know why we're talking, and there was a lot of chatter about going back to the Line Lumber Road thing. I'm sick of hearing about Line Lumber Road. I don't want to hear it. You can talk to me about it. I don't want to hear it. I don't even want to talk about it right
directed
now.
by the Board of Selectmen to concentrate solely on a fire station and to not use a Line Lumber Road area. That was the direction we got. Our committee put together with our consultants, we evaluated all the sites that we knew that were available, and we took a look at a couple of others, and we came to the conclusion that the best site for a new fire station was at the Stoughton Armory site. That was our recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and we came up with a number. Now, it was a very strange motion at the end of the select board. I couldn't really understand why they made that motion, saying you can give the finance committee the program and the plans. I always thought the finance committee was supposed to look at what the cost was.
That's why I don't even care whether I see the plans.
Joel, you took the words out of my mouth. You told us, I remember this clearly. It was like 2 years ago. You said you can't just have a building floating in the air. You know, there's no such thing as like an imaginary, like a diagram in the sky. It's got to be planted in something grounded somewhere.
Oh yeah, we were sitting a couple of years ago when they came in front of us and they said they wanted what, $3.5 million for design fees, but they didn't know where it was going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that we got that changed around. The committee came up with what they feel is the right number and the right design. And Mr. Anzavino is correct. I was expecting them to answer that question about why were they moving the chief and the administration over to the new building. The Chief Laracy feels very strongly about doing that, and he's the only one who can really answer that. We don't have anybody on our building committee who can.
Yeah, by the way, Joel, I added to that, there was talk during your meeting about moving the training room over underneath something that was on a second floor.
No. That came up with one of the members of the select board is still fighting to put a new fire station over on Freeman Street. And basically his theory is that we would take the administrative areas and everything else and put it on a second or maybe a third floor and build parking underneath it, similar to what you see at Target.
Oh, no, that isn't what I meant. This is for the armory design. They were showing the design where the room that was facing facing the Pleasant Street. I'm saying Pleasant. I'm not sure if that's already 139.
That's correct.
Turnpike Street.
Oh, Pleasant Street.
There's that section was going to slide back underneath I forgot what's on the second floor, but there was something moving out in which they were going to then. I think it had to do with maybe maintaining Fire Station 2 for something, and then bringing a portion of the building back in place of that.
No, internally at our building committee meeting, Dave, we took a look at the concept of what would be the impact if whoever's in Fire Station 2 now, the chief and the administrative officers, didn't move but stayed there. Okay? Yeah. And the impact is that there would be a slight redesign of the building, and we would probably delete about, I'm going to say, 1,500 square feet of structure, which, as a number of you know, structure costs money. Okay, so that's where it's kind of left. But we did exactly what we were directed to do by the select board, and we designed it in accordance with what everybody wanted. And the finance committee can make the ruling that why should we pay to have everything move over from Fire Station 2 to the new building? Or the select board could, or a town meeting could, for all I know.
Right, but the 28.2 is with everything moving to the Army.
Yes, it is.
Okay, okay.
I thought the chief said, part of the problem with staying there was there's no girls' locker rooms over at Station 2. So they need some space to do something with that. And that was the theory about moving them over to the other one.
Well, Station 2, I'm not an expert on fire stations, but I did get a chance to review the plans, and they were interesting. I don't think I've ever seen anything like them before in public construction.
If I could add to that, I think part of it is that the way the chief would have to reallocate, and Joel, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it had to do also with the way the chief would have to reallocate resources and manpower. Then it would lead to needing more room at Station 2. And opening up that space would allow that to be readjusted to allocate for that, including women's locker rooms and.
It's well, not so much women's locker rooms, but it's my understanding is that currently there is not an ambulance at Station 2, but he needs to have certain changes made to the building itself in order to accommodate an ambulance there. And his theory is that if he moves his people over, then he can make that change. It would be a minor change. And then the ambulance would be there and they would be able to staff an ambulance. His concern is that because of the very dense area along Route 27 heading towards Cobb's Corner, it would be better for him to have an ambulance working out of that station. That was what he said to me. Whether that's right or not, I can't answer that question.
But those resources, that space was definitely going to be reallocated as a result of that shift.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, well.
A little interesting.
That's a topic for another day. No, what the concern here is, we're 3 weeks out from being done, and we have a huge project that is no funding source, lukewarm reception at the board for its current site, and potentially in May or June we could have a infrastructure package from the government that maybe we might get some grants or something if we wait. But we're here now, but we got to do something in 3 weeks.
Well, I know that tomorrow morning there's going to be a meeting. Robin, you're meeting with Rick Hill.
Yes.
And I will also be attending, at least listening for a while, to talk about the funding source and how it could happen. And then we should be able to give you an answer on that probably at the end of the day, Ed.
Well, I'm also strongly opposed to they want to do a 30-year bond to make the math work, and I think that's a wrong way to go. Costs us a lot more in interest just to do that.
The group that's working on the funding is prepared to make a presentation to this committee, and at that point in time, that's open for discussion.
Because that's the way they make the math work. You do 30 or 20, you get a big difference in math. So, but anyway,
we're not quite sure what's going to happen. I can't really answer. I mean, there's a lot of options that we could do.
I'm just saying, here we are. We got 3 committees going to meet on that night. We have like 30, 40, 30 people, and here we are 3 weeks out. We don't know what's going on. And
I will tell you this, that in accordance with the requirements of the Finance Committee, our committee has put together everything that you requested that you have. What is it, John? 14 days before you actually talk about it?
We don't have a funding source.
We'll have it. We have everything but the funding source. Everything was ready to go.
Yeah, but it hasn't been voted by the board yet.
That's correct.
And the board had made their own policy. They wouldn't put anything on the warrant without it. So they did it anyway.
Hey,
Joel, I
we've
don't
been
think
down
it has
that
anything-
road.
Yeah.
We're just
Joel, it has
doing our
nothing to do with-
job. What can I
yeah,
say?
it's not, yeah, nobody was
Right.
pointing at the.
I'm not,
at the
I didn't say anything about the committee, Joe.
No, it had
All right,
nothing
so
to do with the-
that's kind of where that stuff is. You have an idea of where the revenue is. It's a little, I think we're a little weak on estimates. I think they need to come down something. We'll wait and see what the budget team comes up with tomorrow night. And that's kind of where we are as of tonight. The other thing I wanted to go over
Mr. Chairman,
for tomorrow, yep.
a member of the Rules Committee has shown up at the meeting. Maybe we could ask that person about.
I don't know, isn't Jess
I
on the
do,
roof? committee?
I see him on the screen. He's right
on
there.
And I don't know, I would also like to address a comment by a previous speaker that the school department has an article to not turn back money or something?
No. That would impact, that could potentially impact the turnback.
Still trying to continue speaking it.
Yeah.
I didn't see any article on here that had a reference to not turning back money. I saw an article about a feasibility study, and I saw an article about creating a special education stabilization fund.
And what were they going to fund it with?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's funded with, Mr. Nokian.
I don't see where it says we're not going to turn back money.
I didn't say they weren't. I said it would impact turnback money. If obviously there's going to be money, if they put money in a stabilization fund, and if that's what happens, that's fine. But what I'm saying is we cannot rely now, if that were to pass, and I don't want to get into a discussion. I'm not trying to pro or con an article. I'm just simply saying that when we consider turnback money, and I was asked about what kind of turnback money there would be, I am telling you that turnback money could be impacted by an article that is on the warrant. I am not lobbying for or against it, as it is not on the agenda tonight. But I did have to say that when you're asking me what I think about turnback money.
Yeah, I think the town manager also referenced that we would be saving this for the conversation next week when it comes
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Well, Selectman Cavey just showed up too. I just thought I would address that. I had heard that, and I didn't find that article. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, I do see a member of the Rules Committee here who could perhaps shed some light on that question.
Which question? Oh, go ahead.
Timing.
Jess was at the committee, whatever, yeah, who's
So
on?
I'm not on the committee, but
Oh, I
Mark
thought you
is.
were, okay.
I'm here, Mr. Chairman. This is Mark Zemanian.
Hello.
Hi. What was the question? I was at a CPC meeting, so I missed most of this meeting.
Yeah,
The
there was a
question was,
question.
why did the Rules Committee consider extending the town meeting out?
The discussion was had by the Rules Committee as to whether or not, or it was presented that the Finance Committee should have as much time as it possibly could get to take any last-minute contract negotiations under your, giving the town manager enough time to, or as much time as possible to close any contracts. Ultimately, a motion was made to move town meeting to, actually, the motion was to recommend through the moderator to the select board that town meeting be moved until May 17th, 2021, and that motion passed by a vote of 6-1 with one dissenting vote.
And the board didn't vote yet on that either? We're still waiting?
No, this meeting took place on Monday, Mr. Laurie. So the select board has not received that. No, it did
Okay,
not.
didn't make the agenda. Okay.
No, it's a recommendation. There's no guarantee what the select board will do with it. It's simply a recommendation.
Mr. Zemanian, the question that was asked really was, did anybody from the Finance Committee request the extra time? That was the real question.
That was not brought up.
All right.
So the answer is no.
Okay, that was the question that come up amongst our committee.
Yeah. It was alluded to, but there was nobody said, oh, Mr. or Ms. So-and-so requested extra time for finance. It was brought up by a Rules Committee member, discussed. Ultimately, a motion was made and voted on, and that motion passed 6-1, as I said.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
That answers your question, Scott.
Okay, all right, so what are we gonna get at?
Well, the vice chairman of the board just came back on. Maybe we could ask him if he can talk to the chair about getting that on their agenda for next week.
My understanding, John, through you, Mr. Chairman, is that the town moderator has already reached out to the select board, and I anticipate that will be a part of their agenda on Tuesday, or their next meeting, whatever that is.
I just figured the vice chair was here. We could ask if he could just make sure he puts a bug in the chairman's ear about, or the chairwoman's ear, to try and get that done as quick as possible, so we would know if we have that 2 weeks' time or not.
I'm assuming we're doing virtual for town meeting. Is that correct, Mark? You still there?
I think as of now,
Yes,
that's.
sorry, Mr. Chair, I was muted. Yes, the Rules Committee discussed this at length, and at this time, it was decided by a unanimous vote, although there was some discussion and desire to have it physical, that none of us were willing to put any of the town meeting representatives in danger. So it will currently be a virtual meeting. We're working with Trish Shropshire and the professional staff to make that as transparent and fluent as possible, but that's a road yet. So we're working on it, though. Hopefully it'll be better than the last one and better than the one before.
Mark, I thank you very much for that.
Yeah, well, we realize there's problems with a virtual meeting. Nobody's denying that. Robin's team has been fantastic in addressing any of the issues that we've brought to them so far. Specifically, Trish Shropshire has been very interested in helping us along and get any of those issues that we had resolved ahead of time. We have 2 or 3 more meetings yet, the Rules Committee, before we have factual information to present. But rest assured, everybody's doing everything they can to make this smooth. So.
And I'll set up those preliminary Zoom meetings again like we did last year. I had about 35 people attend those collectively. I'll try to promote those more, so I have these preliminary open meetings that people can pop into. We'll record them and broadcast them on SMAC. And again, they're not my taking a position on the articles. It's simply, those are simply factual information presenting. And also maybe presenting contracts if I have them. Just areas that we can save time at town meeting if everybody can have their basic questions, their basic factual informational questions answered ahead of time. I'd like to continue doing that even when we get back to real town meeting, continuing those Zoom meetings like that, because we have a lot of people pop in right after work or at lunchtime if I did one at noon on a Saturday. So I'd like to actually take that as something like an hour with the town manager on these articles today. And what questions do you have? And have it like we did last year. And the people who popped on, I think Mr. Zemanin, you were on a few of them.
Oh, yes, I was. It's a good opportunity to kind of kick around some of the more difficult questions, and Robin was always helpful with that. I will take a shameless plug by saying, any town meeting representative that is here, please attend the training meetings that Trish Shropshire has. Yeah. Even if you think you know at this point, you know how to do this, she wants to see us. There's information she has to make this smoother, and there will be changes this year, and those changes will be presented to the town meeting reps during those informational sessions. So it'd be super helpful. She'll set a bunch of them up. If we can get everybody that's a town meeting rep there, that will only help our cause. So.
Ed?
Yep.
Looks like Elliot's had his hand up for a while. He just never put it down.
Elliot, you got a question, or you just got your hand thing up?
You never put it down from raising it last.
I never put my hand down. I'll do that now.
Okay, great.
All right.
All right, so that's kind of where we are as of tonight. We have some items that need to be checked out in the budget. Obviously, the fire thing tonight with the lieutenant and the captain line. And tomorrow night, we're going over DPW with the parks thing we came up last time with, to go over that. And at that point, I would like to, after that, I think that takes care of all the budgets on the town side we have to deal with.
Mr. Angelino, I did send you that PowerPoint. You should have it in your email now.
I already responded.
Oh, I didn't see. I had to check my email again. You have me so engaged.
I said thank you, and when I saw the original email that was attached to it, I went back and found that Mr. Anokian, of course, had forwarded that to the committee that day.
Well, you have me so engaged here, I never went back to check my email.
But I do appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, so
Eddie,
I'd like to see if I can get Bill to, what do you got, a question, Scott?
just a quick one. Did we didn't do the enterprise accounts, right?
No, I was just going to say that, Scott.
That's the only,
Part of the,
you said we
part
did.
of
I
the
just
joint
wanted to
hearings.
check.
Part of the joint hearings.
We haven't done Cedar Hill water or sewer.
Right. And if you saw the penny save at, what's it called, the Suburban Shopper today.
Suburban.
Those agendas are out for those days that are coming up.
I think there were 3 pages of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was. Why is the 11th on there twice or 3 times?
Because it's each committee, Dave. If there's a joint hearing, each committee posts their own agenda, and they post it as having a joint meeting with the other committee.
Oh boy. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
I know. And you look at it and you go, "What's up?" Well, I
I
mean,
thought,
that's
I
a
thought
question you could ask Joel. How did they have a presentation from the committee, and the committee had no agenda posted that they were doing anything like that?
I thought I had to get my eyeglasses checked, so thank you
No.
for that.
I did the same thing, Dave. I did a double take, and then I realized it was the other committee posting me.
All right, thanks.
All right, what I'm gonna try to do for tomorrow, hopefully we can do this. Everybody check your notes on budget findings that we have so far, FTEs, questionable amounts, all that.
They're all
And
questions.
after tomorrow, we'll see if we can give all those to Bill and we can get a new run on the budget. Clean up all that type of stuff and maybe, consider taking down some of the revenue estimates after we hear, what they're gonna say tomorrow.
And
So
we
we have
did-
like a
we
new
did
updated
get that-
budget.
We did get that list, Ed, right? They did send that list out shortly after we asked for it about the changes.
Yeah, that was the dollar amounts. There's a couple more, and then there's some FTE things that gotta get cleaned up.
Right, but I mean, we had asked about that. We had asked about the changes that had been talked about already, and I believe Bill sent it out the next day.
Yeah, it's on a one-page sheet.
Yeah.
It's not the.
No,
the
no,
actual-
no, but we said before you run a new budget,
Yeah,
can we just see what's
well,
there?
we can do that again for maybe tomorrow if we find any more findings.
Yeah, but I mean, he did send that out, so I'm just saying, if you're asking people to look at the budget, they should make sure that they take into account what Bill sent out to us, so that they've tried to account for all these things, and they're aware of them, so you're not, pushing for things to be done that they already know about, that's all.
Yeah, okay.
That
All
was-
right,
That was the main point, Ed, just to make sure that you had seen the list.
Yep.
And that you should be using that if you're looking for additional.
Yeah, it's a good sized list. It's worth, you're right, John. It's absolutely.
Thank you, David.
you got those, so that's what we're gonna be tomorrow. It's gonna get fast and furious the next 3 weeks between all the joint meetings, what we gotta do, updated information. Be ready to think fast on your feet, because that's how it's gonna go. That's where we're going. So does anybody else, anything else they would like to talk about tonight as far as budget or articles, before we sign off?
Are we still waiting for some sort of employee with pay list or something like that?
I believe you received a list with all the breakdown of the percentages. Did you get that last week?
Yeah, but I thought there was gonna be a follow-up that had a better clarification on there.
Well, Mr. Zemania wanted all the salaries, I think, for the positions, but we sent a salaries list. But the problem is that the salaries list is the salary. It's what the person makes total. And then the percentage of where
The,
those have split.
We haven't seen the DPW one that lists all the, 10% here.
The split list, I thought you got that. I
Yeah,
thought,
we No, we got yours, the master one, but, and we got the,
And that had everything on it.
yeah,
That
the DPW was on that, yeah.
spreadsheet was everybody's salary.
it was too much, yeah. It
Then the
wasn't
PDF
cut.
came out right after that, and it turned out, they thought it was just DPW, but when you looked at it, there was only a few extras outside of DPW that
Right.
had split allocations of the salaries, and it was all on the PDF, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
So I always have to qualify that now, because, I'm getting older, and I might not remember.
That is correct. There, I am asking Tom, though, because of the question on the parks that we
Yeah.
had the other night, to go
Yeah.
over that list, because the person who had prepared the budget initially had reallocated some of those, and Tom just wants to be sure that when she reallocated them, she had a clear thought process for that, and we can outline that. So we just want to make sure that that allocation is reflecting the split on work.
And we'll be doing that tomorrow.
Yeah,
That's
so
what you're
hopefully we'll
gonna
get
be
that
doing
tomorrow.
And Tom is,
Be ready.
I talked to Tom today about that, and that's what's going on there.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Zemanian had his hand up.
Yeah, smart.
Just a quick, it's a clarification for Robin. I don't need the salaries. You did send that out and you sent a comprehensive list for the DPW. What I was looking for is that there are other employees throughout, town-wide whose salaries are split. If we could also see those, that way we can line them up with the budget.
I think they were on that PDF, and there's only about 3 of them.
I only saw the DPW unless there's a new list.
No, the PDF that come out at the same time, Mark, when we had our next meeting and it came up, and they said, well, I thought I was gonna have to send more, but it turned out everything is on there. There's a couple of positions that weren't part of DPW. They were in, I got it right here. They
Okay.
were in engineering. There was a project engineer. The senior clerk too, that was split between the vet veterans, veterans agent and the assessors. And there was a program admin in recreation and the GIS coordinator in engineering. So those were all on that list that came out. When you first looked, the majority of them are public works, but
Yeah, I'll double check
Robin did
mine.
mention that was, it turned out that did have everything on there.
It was just how it was labeled.
It just,
Okay.
yeah, I think it come out as DPW, but it actually had everybody. I think that's,
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's what come out.
I'll double check. If I don't have the latest, Robin, I'll ask you for it again.
Okay.
Sure.
All right, anybody have anything else? All right, then, we'll,
I'm gonna move that we continue this public hearing to Thursday, March 4th at 7:15 PM as a Zoom meeting. Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Second.
okay, second, great. Okay, Ed votes yes, Bob's not here. Chet,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
yes,
Yes,
Ben. Ben, still here?
he departed.
He departed, okay. John Anzavino,
Yes.
Joel,
Yes.
D. John Rock,
Yes.
Marty,
Yes.
Elliot,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
and Enoch's not here, so we're good. Okay,
You come up with 13 there, Ed?
I got 12.
Ben left.
Oh, yeah, Ben left, okay.
Motion to
There you go.
adjourn.
There's the 12. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
That's what I just said.
Second.
Thank you. Second, okay, thank you. Ed votes yes. Bob's not here. Chet,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Scott,
Oh, I'm only gonna say yes to Vaughn's motion to adjourn.
okay. Jess,
Yes.
Ben. He's not here. John Anzavino,
Yes, I support Mr. Enochian.
excellent. Joel,
Yes.
D. John Rock,
Yes.
Marty,
Yes.
Elliot,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Enoch's not here. Okay, we're good. All right. We'll see everybody tomorrow
tomorrow.
night.